Friends, welcome back and happy, shall we say, 1 week belated Father's Day. We were kind of aiming to do this last week, but there wasn't enough time with other streams. But me and my very special guest and returning guest, he's been on multiple times, Mark Turi and I, we're going to be sharing our personal stories of what it was like growing up with psychologically abusive and emotionally absent fathers and how they influence our affiliation with the quote Church of Scientology. And with Father's Day having recently passed, we're going to take the time to reflect on our respective journeys and hopefully shed some light on how we attempted to break free from the grips of this harmful organization, including the impact that Scientology had on our relationship, specifically with our fathers. So we hope this video will show how we kind of attempted to reclaim our lives, how we found healing, and how we gained strength, hopefully, to overcome the challenges of our past and perhaps inspire others to do something similar. Without further ado, please welcome returning guest, Mr. Mark Turi. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, great, Doug. How are you?
Not bad, man. And thanks for coming on, Mark. Trigger warning,
Yeah.
guys, this might be a little heavy. We'll try to keep it light, but
hmm
we are going to be talking about Mark's upbringing and how that might have led him into Scientology. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but do you mind kind of
Sure.
introducing yourself, Mark, and start at the beginning, perhaps about what your upbringing was like, specifically with your father, and then how maybe you've gotten, found another home, so to speak, in Scientology.
Yeah, sure. First thing to tell about my father is, like Doug's father, my father passed away 3 years ago in May of 2020. He did not pass away from COVID, which was, of course, was the pandemic at the time. But he believed that he passed away from heart disease, possibly a heart attack. And again, that ambiguity will be a theme here um, going forward, because I don't exactly know the exact reason of how and why he passed away. Um, but yeah, my dad was born in Hungary, which is where I live. He's born in the city where I live. He's born in the literally the next district to where I live today. But back in 1946, in May of 1946, so about a year after the war. And what's very interesting is being in Hungary, for those who may know on different streams that I've talked about it, like on Aaron's stream a little bit and so forth. Um, my family is Hungarian, of course, and my father and my grandparents actually left Hungary. They were refugees during what's called the 1956 Hungarian Revolution, which took place between the 23rd of October and the 4th of November in 56. So my grandparents basically woke my dad up in the middle of the night shortly after the revolution started. Not exactly sure the exact date, but sometime after the 23rd of October. And they told him to pack a suitcase and that they were leaving Hungary. And kind of unbeknownst to my dad, he didn't really know where they were going. He was 10 years old at the time, very traumatic experience to become a refugee just literally overnight. They walked from Budapest to the Austrian border and they crossed over. That's over 220 kilometers. Forgive me, I can't remember how many miles that is, but obviously over 100. Yeah, on Google Maps, it says that the route they took would have taken 44 hours to walk. So they walked over obviously a couple of days and, again, very traumatic experience. And then they got to Austria and the Austrians didn't want them to settle. So then they went to Italy and they couldn't stay there. And eventually in 1957, they came to Canada. And one of the reasons why I'm mentioning this is also because for the very, very first time, I got to write about their story in an essay that I'm doing. I've mentioned before, I'm in a master's program. And so because people are very interested in the story of refugees and people like myself who are kind of part of the diaspora, Hungarian diaspora, and have returned to Hungary, a lot of my professors have, very curious about the story of my grandparents and my father. And I think it's one that several thousand, 100,000 people took as well. And I just know a lot of it because, my father didn't really actually tell me too much of it. He was always very quiet about it, but my grandfather told me basically about the whole story. And of course, at the time, my grandfather was, I guess, like 29 years old, so he had more of a recollection. But my dad grew up, mostly in Canada, and met my mom in the late late 1970s, and my upbringing was more emotionally absent. Like, even to this particular day, not only am I not exactly sure what my father died of, um, because he had another family and they kind of kept that secret, and the details were kind of nondescript. Um, I have no idea, unlike you, Doug, what my dad's religious beliefs and affiliation were. Like, he never discussed that. And when I would ask him, especially when I was a teenager, he would change the subject. So I never really knew my father in that way. He never opened up. He was very quiet. He said very few things. He didn't participate at all. He didn't teach me the things that a father is, quote unquote, supposed to teach a son. It was just, he just woke up before, or he excuse me, he went to work before I woke up, and then he came home from work when I was asleep. And maybe on Sundays he would have lunch, maybe dinner with us, and that's when we would see him. But he was always working, which at the time was in car sales, and he was basically just trying to do that. And very, very nebulous upbringing, very kind of uh, un, didn't really even know him, but he was in the house, which was always really weird, because had he died, when I was a kid, or had he been, had my parents been divorced and he lived in another country or another city, I don't know if I would have even really known. So it's kind of really weird when your father is there, but physically, but then not present at all emotionally and doesn't teach you anything. So it was a very, very strange um, upbringing. And if we get into Scientology, I guess the basics is of why one of the reasons I got into Scientology is, when I was 22, I needed to grow up, and I never really had a foundation. Never really. I had some temporary male role models. My uncle, some teachers that were male, a couple principals that were male. Neighbors on the street that were fathers, but nobody was ever consistent. And in comes Ron, who himself was a father, probably not the best father, but he was. And all of a sudden, I'm reading the cleaning manual, and I had never learned how to clean anything really. If I missed my chores, nobody cared. I was supposed to clean my room, take the dishes out of the dishwasher, but I did that, you know, to the most minimum of what I could do, and I had an allowance and whatever, but I was never really into much of a being in kind of a work ethic type situation where you work to earn your money or you clean to do that or whatever. And basically, I think L. Ron Hubbard became almost like a surrogate father to me, and also to a lot of people that I saw in Scientology. Because then, when I was listening to Ron's lectures, he was basically giving some fatherly advice. I mean, he was teaching, me about how to do certain things that I had not learned before, and you know, um, it was just kind of, at the time growing up, very challenging. And then, like, when someone tells you how to clean, or someone tells you how to do something, it kind of like, oh, at 22, I'm like, oh, well, now I know how to do it. I mean, I didn't know how to tie a tie until I was in Scientology. I taught myself how to tie my own shoelaces. I learned to play guitar by myself. I mean, I learned to shave by myself. And this is also before YouTube. This is just by trial and error. Now you can go into YouTube and you can say how to shave your face, and there's tutorials. I never knew how to do that. I bought my first can of shaving cream, all this kind of stuff. So it was just like, it was just a very strange kind of upbringing, in that sense, where my father was there physically, in the house physically, but did not participate in other ways that I guess we could say a healthy relationship, or a healthy relationship with a father would. And certainly that also led to a lot of resentment in my past. But it's definitely one, you know one big reason why I got into Scientology and stayed.
I can relate to that because, in a different scenario, can I ask you a question on that real quick? Why was he so absent? If he was in and around the house, was he cheating on, why didn't he want to be a father? He didn't even teach you how to shave. What was going on there, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, again, I never got a direct answer, but I do know from my mom years later, he was probably cheating multiple times, but my mom never had conclusive evidence
Mhm.
until when I was 22 or 21, maybe I was almost 22. And finally, with someone who lived in my hometown he was cheating with, and there's a whole story. But when my mother was finally presented with the hard evidence, then she divorced my father. And one of the reasons was before, he'd stay out late, but he'd come home. My mother told me one time she actually found in our hall closet in the entrance of the foyer of our house a letter that he had been sent from a woman, but it wasn't sexual. It wasn't like an affair. It was just he had been in Montreal because, as I mentioned, my father grew up there, and my great grandmother, his grandmother, lived there until she passed away in the 90s. So in the late 80s and early 90s, he'd go to see his grandmother, and I guess he met someone. Now we can assume he probably did have an affair, probably had multiple affairs. But at the time, this is before social media. This is just a letter. There really wasn't any conclusive evidence. And also, I think my mother was very scared of divorce. In the culture, you just
Yeah.
don't really get divorced. So she really tried to make it work, despite the fact that my father just was completely absent. And I think, to be completely honest, when I was growing up, I was sick quite a bit. I had childhood cancer, unfortunately, and it was very hard on the family, obviously. And my dad just withdrew. Like, I don't think that he could take the pressure. And plus, I'm not a father. I know, Doug, you're not a father, but it's a very I can only imagine how stressful and how changes are made, and really you kind of have to adapt to those changes. And if you just kind of get married because you're supposed to, and maybe we can sort of get into that, because I mean, my parents met Christmas in 1976. They were engaged Valentine's Day 1977, and they were married in July of that year. They knew each other literally for like 7 months. And so it was very quick. And I just think that they didn't really know each other. And so my father just kind of threw up his hands. And I think at some point he definitely was just at work. He worked as a car salesman. And back before car salesmen had salaries, they used to only work on commission. He made a lot of money in the 80s. He didn't make a lot of money in the 90s during recessions. People don't buy cars. When the economy is great, people buy cars. So he went up and down on the scale of his business was great. We were great. His business was bad. We were bad. And I think he just honestly just didn't want to be home. It was a very chaotic environment in my home also. I That's one of the reasons I love silence, because growing up with a lot of people just being very animated and loud, and there's always something going on, and there was always a lot of stress. I think my dad just kind of went, I can't control this, so I'm going to just leave, basically, and just sleep here and eat here. And then, yeah, maybe his affairs were here and there. My dad drank, and then he got out of it. He stopped, because he was abusing alcohol. My uncle, who also was a recovering alcoholic, got him out of that. And then he just kind of became more and more withdrawal. I also want to say my father also in the early 90s too, he himself was diagnosed with cancer, and it was touch and go. And he got very angry and fought with my mom basically every day, shouting matches, arguments, because he was scared. He was totally fine, but there was that steady decline, I think, of just not really wanting to participate. And so, really, my sister and I kind of were very much emotionally neglected. And yeah, it was just a really bad situation piled on top of each other, just being withdrawn, having this childhood trauma, maybe rushing into a marriage. Maybe, my mom can be a little bit loud and stressed out, and it's kind her parents, my none of my mom's family liked my dad. They really didn't like him at all. They never got along with anybody. He was rarely at family events. If he came, he would eat and go, and he would just whatever he was doing. He made excuses and who knows what else. So, just not a great situation. And I think one of the big aspects of Scientology was that stability, having a father figure, being learning how to do again these things. Like I felt lost. Like some of my friends had a dad. They went to their little league games. They went to sporting events. My dad never did that. He did one time. He showed up for 10 minutes and left. I mean, just all these things that were just very weird. And we never got an answer for it. Was this your dad's working? And dismissed it. And he never said anything about that. He was always very hush hush quiet, would change the subject. It was just, yeah, it was just odd. And again, even with religion, like he never talked about it at all. I couldn't tell you. I can tell you that my grandmother was born Protestant, my grandfather was born Jewish, and my father in his 20s went to India because there was a Buddhist teacher. So he studied Buddhism. Beyond that, I couldn't tell you anything. And again, every time I wanted to ask him a question, he literally would change the subject. So I didn't know that much about my dad, and it was just really strange because when he passed away, we were not in contact. We were estranged for a number of years, and really nobody told us that he had passed away until a friend of my father's called my mom and said, "Well, your dad had, your husband or your ex-husband, my father, had passed away." It was just very strange, and yeah, no, there was no um, remorse, and there was no making up, which was also very, very sad too, because my sister and I would have liked to have said goodbye. We would have liked to at least had some kind of closure, and we just unfortunately could not have that. So yeah, not really a great situation.
Really sorry to hear that, Mark. And thank God you turned out, because that can really fuck you up, and you can turn out, drugs,
Yeah.
a shitty person. You could become like your
Mhm.
father. That's one of the most remarkable absent fathers I've heard of. He doesn't sound like he actually wanted to be a father. You
No, I
know
don't
what?
think so.
By the way, guys, real quick, we always have a delay, and sometimes he'll pixelate because of the extreme distance we are. But his audio will should sound fine during this connection, just to let you know. But Mark, it's I don't. It's just weird how you never got any information out of him. When I got out of the call, even to this day, I'm still trying to find out who my parents are because they didn't tell me anything. But
Yeah.
different than you, maybe they over cared for me because they were there. My mom would go to my speech tournaments when I was trying to be an actor in junior high.
Mhm.
They were kind of over controlling, I guess, overprotected. My mom, was like, I was always doing not super dangerous stuff, but stuff where, my mom would try to protect me. And my
Yeah.
dad, I can relate to your experience because my dad was very withdrawn. I never knew who the hell he was. And when he got into Scientology, he completely changed. And even though he was more than willing to be a father, he was good. He just was cut off emotionally, I think, even before
Mhm.
Scientology. And that was his escape because of his upbringing. So it's kind of like intergenerational problems. And you know what? There should be a fucking test to be a freaking parent because it's the most important thing. It's going to totally determine the society that we live in. Because if
Mhm.
you pass on your blind spots to your kid, it doesn't always mean it's going to fuck them up. Like in my
Mhm.
situation, it really fucked me up, but I had to try to rise above. Otherwise, I was going to be a Scientologist for the rest of my life. So it can present a challenge that maybe can make you stronger or better, but it can
Mhm.
also, my case too, do a shitload of irreparable damage. So I was just always, anybody can have a kid. and there's no qualifications. And your situation about your dad is not unusual, as you know. I mean, that doesn't justify him not being there.
Yeah.
But how many people get married after a year and they're young, they're 19 or 20, they don't know quite who they are yet, and then they have kids because it's a societal thing. Their parents push it on them. It's just what you're supposed to do. And that's why I never had kids, Mark, because I knew I was fucked up. And I'm like, until I heal myself, I ain't passing this shit on to one or two creatures that I'm going to birth that I don't
Yeah.
even know. Such was the, effect that my parents had on me. And
Yeah.
also, bro, like anybody looking in thought we had the perfect family. I would tell my friends, who love my mother because she put on a pretty good front, and she wasn't beating me behind the closed doors or anything. She was just very manipulative. So my friends would always go when I try to point out things, and I thought I was going crazy because my dad and mom would always tell me they'd double team me and tell me it's me, or whatever. And
Yeah.
like I said in previous videos, I was the black sheep of the family, and my sister was the golden child, meaning I was the one that was the scapegoat and always getting in trouble. And I kind of took that on because that's who they said that I was. So I acted
Hmm.
that out. And it's just interesting, man, because my dad got so walled off that he exited this world a few months ago, man. I still haven't gotten the explanation from my mom.
Mm.
We've had the most emails that we've had ever in the last few months since he passed in March. And she's still traumatized where she doesn't feel comfortable yet. The fact that we're even communicating in email and not talking about Scientology, I'm very careful not to bring that up. I don't know where she stands with that, but just the fact that she's communicating, she's really hurt. And I
Hmm.
never got, it's just another secret in my freaking family, Mark, because I wouldn't be surprised if she passes without knowing what happened to my dad, what they've been up to for the last freaking 15 years or whatever. And it's just like,
Yeah.
I never got to know my dad, man. And yet he, unlike yours, he was always around. I just never knew who the fuck he was, man.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, yeah, it's hard. When my parents got married in 1977, my mother was 29, turning 30 the next month, and my dad had turned 31. Now, if we look at that from 2023, 29 and 31 is actually sometimes considered too young to get married. Most
Really?
people are getting married over 30. It depends on where you are, right? Basically, but a lot of
Totally.
people kind of get married around 30-ish. But in 1977, with grandparents that were born in the early 20th century who got married in their early 20s, they were considered old, and I think it was just like pressure. Like my mom was turning 30 and she got married, a month before she turned 30. That's a lot of pressure. And my dad was 31, so he'd already turned 30. And I think my grandparents and the sort of cultural and societal pressures of their family put a lot on them. And
Yeah.
basically, how my parents met was at Christmas of 76. My mom, who was a teacher, and she had already been a teacher over 10 years at that time. It used to be in Canada where you went to teachers college in the 60s for 1 year and then you became a teacher. So my mom was starting her career when she was 19 years old, which was, in 66. So by the time 76 comes along, she's 10 years into her career. And she had been with a guy for 7 years, no commitment. Okay, long time. And they broke up because she wanted to get married and have kids, and this other guy didn't. So, my mom's culture is Macedonian, but she never liked the typical Macedonian guys because they always wanted, a stay-at-home mom and a very traditional wife. And my mom was influenced by the feminism of the 1960s and 70s. She used to watch the show Rhoda, if you remember that show. That was the first woman, professional woman, to get married and divorced on television. I mean, that was like a huge deal. Rhoda Morgenstein was her hero. I mean, there was second wave feminist type, and my mom didn't want to be that traditional housewife, quote unquote. They met. My dad was running singles events in the events room or the party room in the condo where he was living with his parents at the time in Toronto. And my dad was, a kind of a hip dude. He had been a bouncer. My dad told me once he got drunk with Freddie Prince when Freddie Prince went to Montreal in this, 70s, and he was a really, I'm sure there's a term, I don't know how well this term is, but I'm sure my dad had a high body count, if you know what I mean, before he got married to my mother. Meaning he, slept with a lot of women.
Okay, I thought you meant he was in the
And
service and
yeah,
blew a lot of dudes away. Okay,
no. It's a colloquial term. No.
got it.
Um, but so he was a go-getter. He was hip. He, played in a band. He was a bouncer. I'm sure he got a lot of attention. And then in comes my mom, who came with a friend, a coworker from school who had known my dad, and they had gone to this party, and she actually met my grandfather. And she just told me recently the story of how they first met my grandfather. His name was Andy, and how the first time she heard Hungarian, because of course I speak Hungarian now, and her reaction
Hmm.
to that. But they met at this singles party, and yeah, it was. I don't know if it was love at first sight, but it was convenience, I guess, at first sight, because my
That's
mom
what it
was
was.
a
Yeah.
kind of a nerdy, kind of bookworm, shy, quiet, cute, couldn't do things without her father's permission. She wanted to. I told this to Rachel Bernstein. We can sort of plug that podcast later, but she wanted to be a rebel and listen to the Beatles and Elvis, but my grandfather said no. But she never smoked. She never ran out. She never did anything. She wasn't a rebellious, person. And my dad is like, hip, go getting, like going to discos and drinking with Freddie Prince and whatever. He's got all these stories that is just really funny. Who knows if they're true? I don't even know. But he would own.
And he froze up. Mark, can you hear us? All right, I'm sure I'll be back. This has happened because we're just so far away from each other. I think he's in Budapest or something. I'm sure I'll be back shortly, but I don't know. I'll ask him when he gets back, Daniel, if he's talking about the father of Freddie Prince Jr.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Oh, you froze up.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm
What?
back. I'm back. My apologies.
Oh, no problem. If that
But
happens
yeah,
again, just jump on in and I'll
yeah.
cover it in between.
But
Please continue.
yeah, basically, long story short, so they got together. My mom told me the first date they went on, which was just after Christmas in '76. My mom ordered a salad. My dad ordered a steak. And because he was working at a dealership, he had the daily deposit from the dealership. So when he paid for the bill, he had like a wad of, hundreds or whatever. And that's how they kind of got together. They were as engaged on Valentine's Day 1977, and again they were married in July. So that's 7 8 maybe 7.5 months they actually knew each other. So that's very quick, and I think a lot of that again had to do with pressure. And
Hmm.
it is what it is. I mean, I'm here today because of that, which is,
It's
for me,
true.
good. And
It's
I have
true.
my sister as a family, so I got to meet her family, and she's stable in that sense, and it's been great. But it comes, of course, with a lot of these kind of issues and sort of some of the unanswered questions. And I guess as I get older, I'm kind of like you, Doug. Like my I'm not really sure if I'm ever going to become a father. Maybe later down the line, I can kind of see myself in 10 or 20 years marrying someone who's a little bit younger than me,
I was
maybe,
gonna
and
say they'd
having
have
a
to be
family. But
younger. Yeah.
yeah. There's people like, I don't know if you know, this is funny, but I think Mel Gibson recently became a father again, and he's like in his 70s, and his girlfriend's like in her 30s. And then like Al Pacino also recently became a father again. So did Robert De Niro, and they're all like in their 70s, and their their partners are, and they're the mothers of their children are in 20s and 30s. Somehow I feel that's going to be my story, not by design, not because I'm creepily wanting someone who's 40 or 30 years younger than me, who might not even be alive today, which is disgusting to think of. It just seems to be that way if
It
I'm
is.
being legitimate. You know what I mean? It's just
I
if
feel
the
you.
numbers are going correct, and it's just one of those things. So who knows? But at the same time, it's like, yeah, there's issues about that. I really, really don't want to be how my father treated us, and so I'd really want to be in a better situation where I can actually be a better father if I have children, which I don't, haven't ever even had a mistake to have a
Wow.
child in my own life. That never been a pregnancy
Good.
scare that I've ever experienced with someone else. So, right now I'm just at school, at university, doing my own thing, and it's working all right. And who knows what the future holds? But I do have a lot of hangups on that, and hopefully, maybe
Yeah, I
that'll
understand.
change in the future. But I don't know right now.
Maybe you will pull an Al Pacino or Robert De Niro. I know one of those 2 that you mentioned. You mentioned 3 of them, but
Yeah,
one of those, I don't know if it's Mel Gibson or Robert Downey, was not happy actually with the, younger gal for some reason, but I'm drawing
yeah.
a blank on why that was. Lady
Well, that was
Veritas.
actually that was actually Mel Gibson, who had a child just over 10 years ago with his girlfriend who was from Russia, and he was very upset about that. But literally just recently, I think just within this year, he has had another child with another person, and who knows, maybe there's some information that it was unexpected, but since he's been divorced, which was one of the most expensive divorces of all time, because I think he was worth $250 million. Since he divorced his wife, I think close to 20 years ago or whatever it was, Mel Gibson has had two additional children from two women who have been quite substantially younger. Anyway, long digression, but yes, and then and then Al Pacino, and then Robert De Niro, and they're in their 70s, still be pumping out kids. It's weird. It's very strange.
It's also a Hollywood thing because the reverse, I'm thinking of Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher, where she's older
Mhm.
and, they can kinda get away with it, and, hey, more power to them, I guess, if as long as it's
Yeah,
mutual. But yeah,
exactly.
like, yeah, lady, I mean, isn't it crazy? I mean, there's no manual on how to be a parent, and there never really could be. Hubbard had pontificated about how to have a marriage, and he had all the tech to do it. It's an experience. I can't imagine what it'd be like. So my parents are kind of off the hook just because they took on the challenge of raising my ass. But nobody knows what the fuck they're actually, doing, and there should be some
No,
qualifications because it's like the most important thing in the world. I think. Let's show Scientology's viewpoint on what they actually say about marriage and what I guess your father didn't really get into Scientology, right, Mark? That was something you escaped
no,
into, so to speak, but you never got him down into the org or anything, right? It was just you by
no.
yourself and the family.
There was always like this weird loose affiliation because my dad, growing up in Montreal, had a friend, and a friend had a sister, and the sister, I think, sometime in the 70s or 70s, I think, got into Scientology, went to Los Angeles, married an American, was on lines probably for about a decade, and then by the 80s she was out. And now I think she lives in like Western Canada or something. I was talking to my mom about this, but they don't really they don't have any contact. But anyway, she's on her second marriage. She has another family. She's not living in America, but that's the only person that I would have known through my father that had some affiliation with Scientology. So it was, father's best friend's sister. But my dad always was skeptical about it. I think they had heard some stuff. Like, I think, as she was in Scientology, they heard it was weird. They heard it was a cult. So then by the time I get in, my father really didn't put any pressure on me to stay or to go. But when I left, he talked about it with me and discussed some of the story of his friend's sister. But again, it's all kind of, second, third person.
Did you ever speak to him, Mark, about when you got out, when you were in, he never tried to rescue you? You never had much contact with him during or after?
Mm,
Did you ever have a conversation about it with him? I guess not, 'cause you didn't talk
Once
once? What did he
we
say?
had one conversation after I got home from Berlin. We were in the car. My father was again very not a very emotional person, and he said I was, going through a tough time, and I guess my mom had said something to him, and he said was something along the lines of, um, "I know that you're, not in Scientology anymore." And he said something like, "I know," or "I think," something along those lines, that it's a hard thing to get out of. And I guess maybe he was thinking about his best friend's sister. I mean, I don't know.
Mhm.
And he just said, like, "I know it's not easy," and then the subject moved on to something else. So he never really gave me any advice. He never really gave me like anything like that. He just kind of gave a little hint of compassion, which was very strange, actually very strange, but he didn't elaborate. So that was all. And then
Interesting.
my mom, I had tons of conversations with her, but my dad, it was just that one thing, and then that was it.
Sounds like your father's just as much of a mystery as mine was. This is one of the things that we this is from Mike Rinder
Excuse me, sorry.
and sure.
Just my water fell. Big deal.
Oh, no problem. This is Mike Rinder and what he had to say about Father's Day, and thank God Mike's doing a lot better. He did an update video a couple of days ago on his cancer situation, and he seems to be
That's
doing
right.
quite well and appreciated the support. This is what he put out on Father's Day, and he says, "This is just to give you guys an idea of what it was like in my family. What's kind of what they say and then what it's really like. Not only during Father's Day and Mother's Day, but holidays in general, and it's pretty bad. So here we go." Scientology likes to portray itself, and feel free to jump in, Mark, if you have anything to say on this or any of these things
Sure.
spark any ideas. Scientology likes to portray itself as family friendly. This is never really true in Scientology. The organization always takes precedence over the individual or family. Isn't that true? Always.
Mm-hmm.
Scientology tries to tell the world that it is a great protector and builder of family relationships. Just look at these excerpts from Scientology.org. So, how does Scientology view marriage and the family? Scientology regards the family as the building block of any society. This is all just gibberish PR because in practice, it's actually the opposite of this stuff. And marriage as an essential component of a stable family life. People often find that after they begin practicing Scientology, their relationships with spouses and other family members strengthen dramatically. This is going to be hard to read, Mark. This is
Yeah.
because Scientology teaches an individual to communicate more freely with others, raises the capacity to love. They never even mention that word except for in one bulletin, and puts one in better communication with family and friends. Surveys have found that after participating in Scientology services, individuals are more likely to marry or stay married and to have children than before they became Scientologists. Now, I'd like to see the statistics and where they just pulled that out of their
Well,
ass. Mm-hmm.
it's the survey is done by Scientologists
Of
with a
course it
bias
is.
towards Scientology. So
Of course
it's
it
like
is.
saying, we asked, I don't know, we asked
5
a hundred
Scientologists.
a
Yeah.
hundred people who like pineapple on their pizza if they like pineapple on their pizza, and they all said yes.
It's
You
the
know,
same way Hubbard did his research, Mark. He
yeah,
tested that on 1 or 2 of his
yeah,
dudes or whatever, and it became like the new tech when he said, "We've
yeah.
surveyed, done tests on hundreds of people and made thousands of
Ooh,
clears and blah, blah, blah." Anyways, continuing on here with this ridiculous.
miraculously, we found exactly what we were looking for.
Yeah, exactly. It all proved out. No confirmation bias or anything. This part where he says people often find that after they begin practicing Scientology, their relationships with spouses and other family members strengthen dramatically. I mentioned Scientology is like a third party predator coming into your family that's normal, and it starts dictating what you
Yeah.
have to do. So not only did it not do that with my family, it for 40 years, briefly, my dad got into it when I was around 9 years old. I just turned 50 in July. So for 41 years, he was a Scientologist thereabouts. And I never got to know my dad because of that. It was the most bizarre. I feel like I lived a parallel life. There was a life I was supposed to have minus Scientology. And then there's all the challenges and the permanent wound that will never heal by Scientology breaking up our family. So they literally do the
Yeah.
opposite of what's said in this. So here we
Well,
go. So
also to add,
please.
Doug, just look at the divorce
Sure.
rate among Scientologists. It's astronomical.
Unless
Absolutely
both are
astronomical.
Scientologists, it can also bond them
Yeah,
together. Because my parents, they were both Scientologists, Mark, and they
true,
stayed together, and
true,
they loved each other. But that was
true.
Scientology. My mom was actually afraid of Scientology. She was just doing it because they were gonna. Well, let me give you an example of like how it threatens divorce. So my
Mhm,
dad brought it home one day, and he
mm,
was down the people already know the story on this, so I'm not going to explain it. But let's just say my dad got into it in a single day. He was down there all day and all night, and he came back needing to borrow $10,000 from his brother because we didn't have a lot of money at the time. And he hit my
mhm.
mom with this, and she's like, "What do you mean we don't have the money?" And they fought for weeks over this. Me and my mom thought it was strange, and her motherly instincts resisted it. So, long story short, they fought forever. And my mom came up one night and said, "I don't want to scare you, son, but your father's gotten into this thing called Scientology, and we may have to get a divorce over this. I don't know what's going on. And I just remember freaking bawling that night. You know, as a kid, it terrifies you
Oh,
because you don't,
yeah,
oh, it's okay, man. It was a while ago and it happened, you
yeah.
know. But my
Still
parents,
traumatizing, still traumatic, but yeah,
yeah, especially when you don't know what the hell it is and it's going to come to dictate your
yeah.
life, unbeknownst to you, you know, for 40 fucking years or whatever. But anyways, so you know how they do it, Mark. They say, why don't you not listen to rumors, this and that? It's not worth getting a
Hmm.
divorce, is it, honey? Just come down and check it out. So they found her vulnerability. She joined, I would say, mostly to keep the family together, not because it was her
Yeah,
thing. But she was super indoctrinated. With my dad's passing, I do wonder if the church has jumped on her. I have absolutely no information since I started speaking out, which in itself is unusual. Like just absolutely nothing. I thought I would have heard from my parents to get me to stop talking
mm,
out on. I wouldn't, but I'm just saying I'm surprised that they haven't challenged me, which is maybe kind of a good sign. But
yeah,
anyways, back to this bulletin. So let's just show you that it actually comes in and screws families up unless they're both Scientologists and the whole family becomes Scientologist. Then it can seem like you're then you can be trauma bonded to the cult, but it's not real bonding or real love. So how does a church view relationships between a Scientologist and family members who are not Scientologists? This is key. And listen to what they say. Because Scientology
oh,
is a relatively young religion, most Scientologists have non Scientologist relatives. Not only that, Mark, they have non Scientologist relatives because there's 0.00001% of the world that's Scientologist. The church
yes,
encourages and the church encourages and helps its members to have excellent family relationships. I'm telling you, brother, I could barely read this without laughing or
oh,
wanting to
I know.
punch my screen, whether or not the relatives are Scientologists. In fact, relationships between a Scientologist and the rest of his family routinely improve after one begins practicing Scientology because one has acquired the means to increase communication and resolve any problems that might have previously existed. As long as I stayed in Scientology, my mother and father were more than willing to help me out through Scientology. But when I
Yeah,
left, they had no ability to communicate or resolve any problems with me. They basically left me to rot and figure it out until I come back to the fold. The church goes to great lengths to reconcile family differences should a problem arise. For example, Scientology chaplains will assist family members to work together to discover the real cause of their disagreements. Yeah, one of the things they do that I
the
discussed with
chaplain.
I know what I discussed with Marcus
Jesus.
a couple days ago is the marriage counseling. This is the way they handle upsets. And my parents went through this,
Hmm.
Mark, and what they do you know what that is, bro? Does that ring a bell? Do you know what
Like
they actually
very
do?
briefly. I mean, it's kind of auditing, isn't it? But it's crap.
Yeah.
It's garbage.
They ask you like what my mom would have sat there and the auditor you go into an auditing session with an auditor and you have the husband and wife sit facing each other and for hours on end until they switch and repeat to the other partner, they'll ask what so my mom's name is Linda and my dad's name is Norm. So
Hmm.
let's say my mom was up and the question would be, Linda, what has Norm what have you withheld from Norm? And the other
Hmm.
question is like, what have you done to Norm? And you just ask these questions over and over. So what would happen, Mark, is not with my family, but sometimes cheating would come out and all sorts of shit. And the other person has to sit there and take it. They can't respond. That's why the auditor's there to
Hmm.
prevent the two from like killing each other. And then they reverse it. And this can either massively break down boundaries and cause couples to want to split, or it can feel like a cathartic experience because, ooh, thank God we got off everything. But which can be good,
Hmm.
but it's just done under circumstances which are really bizarre because there's this third party auditor, you're paying a bunch of money, and it's not necessarily the safest way to go about quote saving a marriage. Oh my God.
Nope. No. Can imagine. It's just like
I
all of that
what
tech stuff. Even I don't know if when you were a kid if you did like child dynamics or anything like that, but I can't even imagine any of that is healthy to any
yeah,
degree. I mean, it's just
no way.
nonsense. Oh
Exactly. I didn't have to do too
gosh.
much Dianetics, child Dianetics. They just put me
Yeah.
on the cans. I mean, well, they tried to
Yeah.
raise me like that. They tried to apply
Yeah.
Hubbard technology to me, you know.
God.
But all I had to do, Mark, was just sit in my younger years with my dad while he was doing his auditor training, while he'd ask me really funky questions and shit. Um, anyways, just to finish this off real quick, then we'll get back to the story. But Okay, so the church goes to great lengths to reconcile family differences should a problem arise. For example, Scientology chaplains will assist family members to work together to discover the real cause of their disagreements. Friends and family of Scientologists are always welcome to visit the church so you too can be captured and, quote, handled, to meet other Scientologists and to have any questions they may have about Scientology answered. Yeah, right. Go down there and just try to ask them any question you want. Is it true that Xenu?
But
And
of
then you're out the
course,
door. Yeah. Regardless of whether the other family members choose to become Scientologists or not, Scientologists take deep pride in their record of resolving family problems and
oh
conflicts.
my God.
Holy
So
shit.
here's what I'm thinking from my journalism.
Y-
I only have two
Yes.
questions: how and why. Like how? Like they're saying they're gonna handle how?
Yeah.
Like
How
just give.
and why?
They're just saying, oh, we communicate freely. How do you do that? Like how? Like tell us how. Like you're just. It's like they're just saying general statements. It's like astrological chart. It's like yeah, I know I have an average sense of humor because I'm a narcissist, but tell me more.
Yeah,
Like I need more
exactly.
specifics. Like we communicate freely. How do we communicate freely? Well, of course, that opens up to the question of going to a church and a parent or someone saying, "Well, how do we communicate freely?" They go, "Oh, well, there's a successor communication course." Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
now
It's
that we're out
ridiculous.
of it, I can see the hook to a sales pitch, and that's obviously what they want. It's awful.
That's true. Mark, I swear
Jesus.
you must be reading my mind because I've said this many times when I talk about my dad's name. It's so odd that I was the artist, rebellious, like freak of the family, and my dad literally was named. You could not, my dad's name is Norman. So he was the most normal, by the book, most non kind of confrontational. And I feel bad for him, Mark, because he was shut
Yeah.
down, man. I think in the
Yeah.
service, and he was a little awkward
Okay.
and just never knew how to communicate with this freaking family. And that's why he got into it. He saw an ad that said Dianetics will teach you how to communicate. He went down to the org and he was sold on it, man.
Was he a
So
veteran?
no, he was in the Navy, like Hubbard, and he was
Okay.
very much
Was
into
he in
planes and shit.
Vietnam?
No, I don't know. I know he
Yeah.
wasn't, but Mark, if you ask me questions like this, I
Yeah.
have no data on my family. Even when I
Yeah.
tried to go to other relatives, his brother, I talked to his
Yeah.
brother after I got out, the one who gave him the $10,000 to get started.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even he, dude, my whole extended family is like the Stepford wives. Every
Yeah.
time I'd go to this is why I don't totally miss the holidays because at least I don't mind
Mhm.
just I used to cry every holiday like for years,
Yeah.
but I'm so used to it now. I didn't even remember my birthday a couple I have to remind I'm just so used to holidays passing me by because I just don't
Mhm.
participate in them because I'm not with my family, which is what you usually do during holidays.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah. Anyways, I forgot what the fuck I was gonna say, but I guess I'll just finish this thing right here
Well,
from
again, yeah, if you don't really know exactly.
I
I'm
don't know
sort of the same way.
who they are. And trying to
Yeah.
get any information out of my mom, they're just very, very secretive.
Yeah.
Part of that is because of Scientology too, because they have to hide their finances. They have church people camping out. They screen their phone calls with the answer machines, no matter who calls. And a big part of that is because once the church came into our life, the cult came into our life, they had to kind of hide from them.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, they're hang up for all the money. Oh God.
Yeah,
Ugh.
exactly. So, anyways, here's what Mike Rinder says on the rest of this blog about kind of what's really going on. But let's just focus on how this works out for Scientology staff, Sea Org members, or declared SPs. Scientology is decidedly not family friendly, and Father's Day is simply another quote reason to try to get suckers to visit the org so the Regis can try to get their money. You can be sure no staff member is being given a day off because it's Father's Day. They're not even allowed to sleep in. There's a planet to clear. The org has to be built to St. Hill size. No time for messing around with quote WOG excuses to go off purpose. Sorry for that word. It's the N word in many countries, but that's what we call outsiders and without knowing it. As for Sea Org members, they're not even allowed to have children. If they do and their children are in the Sea Org, like mine, they don't have a clue it's even Father's Day today. See, Mark, they just kind of forget holidays and shit. It's just not a
Absolutely.
it's just not a thing at all. And if you tried to ask for an hour to spend with your children or father, you would be routed to ethics for having, quote, other fish to fry. This is true, man. It sounds so
Hmm.
heartless just reading this. And for all the SPs out there, it goes to another level. If your Scientology child tried to contact you for Father's Day, they would be expelled from Scientology for committing the high crime of contacting a declared SP. This,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, Mark, is why my dad, up until his dying day, could not have communication for me. I'll just tell you something real quick, man, about what happened with that, because there was a little bit of a silver lining, but let me try to explain this to you. This is kind of bad.
Of course.
So I hadn't spoken to my dad or seen my dad or my mom, including my sister, for about at least 10 years. There was one
Mm-hmm.
exception when I saw my mother for a very brief period of time several years ago. Other than that, I have no idea what the fuck's going on with them. So my dad, again, I don't know what he passed up, but my mom was kind enough to leave a letter. She sent something in the mail. And you know what's weird about it, bro? I always check the mail. I'm going to need a cigarette for this. But for whatever reason, I didn't check the mail for like a week. This is in March, a few months ago. And then,
Mm-hmm.
like at 4 a.m, I just felt compelled to put on my pajamas and go down and look in the freaking mailbox. And 10 minutes later, I, was in tears trying to take in the fact that my mom said, I thought you should know that your father has passed. And,
Right.
she wrote a very sweet letter. By the way, her heart has changed just from the emails that I've gotten. I could tell something's happened, but again, I'm not going to push it by asking about Scientology or pressuring her in or any way. She's
Mm-hmm.
hurting. She said that's her best friend. They were married for, I don't know, 50 freaking years or some
Oh.
ungodly amount. And they did love each other because they had the Scientology bond too. Also, I want to
Mm-hmm.
say that Scientology breaks a natural bond because my mom and dad are doing something, especially my mom, because it's in the woman's DNA, I feel, obviously. She's doing something that would be impossible for a mother to do. I know deep down she misses me or whatever, but
Yeah.
they have a way of we just become spirits. We're not necessarily kid, and that's just the body version. The spiritual version, we have other parents, maybe God or
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in the Palladians or whatever, but we're just playing a game here in Scientology. So what my dad said when I emailed him, maybe about close to a year ago, and I hadn't. The only time I can email him is when it's something we have to talk about. It's important business, and it has to be what they call good roads, good weather. And you know what that
Yeah.
is, right, Mark? Do you want to
Mm-hmm.
define that for people? Just check your Scientology
Yeah.
memory.
It's basically when you write a letter or something to a family member that's antagonistic or whatever, you're supposed to just talk about small talk, like
Yeah,
good roads, fair weather. Talk about the weather. Don't talk about anything controversial. Leave it somewhat positive, but don't talk about anything heavy, essentially.
exactly. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of calm I would have here and there through email, never phone calls. That ended off a long time ago when I actually threatened. Listen, I'm not proud of this, but the amount of anger that I had coming out for years and my parents not taking any responsibility for looking at it. And not only that, but turning on me and kind of not sending the church after me. But let's just say when I really needed them to test, that's the true test. They not only abandoned me, let's just say they made my life very challenging. I threatened suicide. I threatened to kill myself. I threatened to kill them. I did anything that I could. I cried on the answer machine, many, many messages. Once in a blue moon, my dad would pick up and I would go hysterical. I would just, Dad, I finally had him. So I couldn't even talk, get him on
Mm-hmm.
the phone, bro. So once in a blue moon, like I said, I was so desperate and hysterical. I was just proving to them and their world that I really was an SP. They tell you you're going to go crazy and lose your marbles if you leave. So I was just proving that to
Yeah.
them. Now you do lose your marbles often because you're simply going through PTSD, your whole reality, you
Mm-hmm.
realizing it's all a lie. And so obviously you're going to act out what they tell you is going to happen. So my parents have all the evidence they need that their kid is in fact an SP. So
Yeah.
long story short, Mark, I emailed him or my mother, whatever, and he jumped in on the email and said, look, and this was back in 2010, 2011, 2 or 3 years out of Scientology when I threatened their life. And I wasn't really serious about it looking back, but in my mind, I was going to go blow up their building, do something bad to them, gun them down, something really bad, dude. I was gonna go kill my parent. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but the only reason I'm saying this, guys, is because I want you to know that I know I'm not alone in this and the feelings that come up when you have such a con. And I think it's important to
Yeah.
share it. I don't want I encourage anybody to do anything that I'm talking about. And I don't think I was going to do it myself, but I just wanted to let you guys know what the severity of what it feels like when your family's being taken away from you by them and there's nothing you can do about it. So
Yeah.
I became really aggressive in 2010 or 11. I left a message on their answering machine saying, I want this to be recorded so you know that I'm not fucking around, because I couldn't get through to them. I said, I'm going to kill you, basically. I
Mm.
hate Scientology. And I just left a long diatribe. They got a restraining order on me and they sent it in the mail. And I felt really shitty when I got that. And I learned how to take the suffering and the healing all upon myself, because they were no longer a person, or terminals, as they say, that I could consult. They were dangerous to consult at this point. So, right before my dad passes, about a year therein, he sends an email back to me after I wrote to him or my mom. And he said, you are an SP. I don't know why you're contacting me. We disconnected from you. You threaten my life. Don't talk to me. It was really brutal, Mark. I don't know exactly what it
Yeah.
was, but let's just say it was really harsh. And I hadn't heard from my dad from
Yeah.
so long. It kind of took me aback, because I thought, Dad, I don't want to hurt you at all. I'm way
Mhm.
beyond that. That was years ago. And so it hit me like, Jesus, does he really think that? Like, that was so long ago. He must know, because I haven't been attacking him for all these years. I haven't said anything. I had no idea
Mhm.
he was still holding on to that. But I don't know if that was true, if that was his Scientology programming, or if he just couldn't handle the fact that I wasn't attacking him and he might have to confront it, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
So,
do.
Mark,
I mean,
just to finish real quick, bro, long story
yeah.
short, the silver lining in this, the best resolve I could hope to have gotten from my father, is I wrote back to him, and just to paraphrase, I said, Dad, I haven't felt that way for a long time. I love you. You're the only father that I have. Disconnection means nothing to
Yeah.
me in my world. It only means something in the world of Scientology. You're always going to be my dad. I'm always going to love you. And I promise you, I have no ill will, and I will not threaten you ever again. And I said, I'm sorry for doing that. I told him, I just said, I was really angry because my entire life was a lie and I grew up in a destructive cult. And I know you'll never understand that. And so he had my
Yeah.
mom write back to me and say like two lines, Dad really liked your message. He accepts your apology. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then he passed a few months later. So at least we had the best resolve we could possibly
Yeah.
hope for. Right.
I mean, yeah, listen, you take what you can get in that sense. And if that's,
Exactly.
even if it's by way of another message, at least it's something. At least you got some kind of closure out of it. And I'm very happy that you got that, you know.
Thanks, man. I guess
Um,
the
it's
best we
what
can hope
it
for.
is. It's one of those things where, I don't want to bring it back to myself to somehow, change the subject or whatever. But
No,
in my
please. I was
case,
done,
yeah,
dude.
I would have loved to have had that closure, because it was not the same situation. Your situation seems to be far more intense because of the Scientology thing. For me and for my family, it was, not understanding the neglect part, but it wasn't like we were being ripped apart by this third party organization. And we never had that kind of relationship. It was always just stagnant and kind of not emotional. And then I did stop talking to my father in 2014 because
Wow,
my
really?
dad started to get really weird and obsessed. Like, I'd come home from Los Angeles and I was not doing very well from 2011 till about 2014, and I had no prospects, and I was just my head was foggy. I was going through lots and lots of depression issues, and eventually, in 2014, which was a pretty tough year. And in 2014, I met my dad for the last time, for dinner at a restaurant, and I really, really, really wanted to start getting my degree because I just didn't know what else I could do. And my dad was always a very negative, pessimistic person. And he just obliterated that idea with so much like, oh, you can't do it, you shouldn't do it. And he was obsessed with me getting into the car business. And like, I am not a salesperson. I don't have that vigor. I'm not that type of person. And he was
Hmm.
just trying to get me all these ideas. And he knows this person who knows this person, and you just tell him my name and he'll get you a job. And there's this course that you can take where they teach you paperwork, you should just do it. And he told me he'd buy me my first suit. You know, you have to have a suit, whatever. I was like, Dad, I don't want to be a car salesman. And I don't know where this came from.
Was
And
he a car
then,
salesman, Mark? Why did he want you
yeah,
to be a car salesman?
he was a,
Okay, well there you
because he
go.
was a
Like
car
father,
salesman.
like
He
son,
spent,
right?
exactly, he spent 30 years. And of course, at the time,
Wow.
I had just come home from Los Angeles. My degree wasn't really getting me anywhere. Not, I wasn't doing a ton of background, not really a lot of background work. I worked on stuff,
Mhm.
here and there. Once every maybe 4 or 5 months, I'd get, a background gig or whatever. And I was mainly just, living with my mom and just not doing much and whatever. And he was just so aggressive. And I don't know. I sent him an email just to say like that, like it's, I don't know, like I don't understand where this is coming from. And he just responded with more negativity. And so I guess from that point, he focused his attentions on his second wife, and she had a son from her first marriage because her first husband passed away. And so my father had, second wife, a stepson. The stepson was married with a child, so he kind of had a grandchild, and he just focused on that. And really, again, it was just it was a hard situation because, like, you know I know that there was at least a week when he was in the hospital before he passed away, where he and his new family had ample time to tell my sister and I what was going on, and that he probably had a bad, prognosis. Also, ironically, my father passed away in the exact same hospital that my sister and I were born in, and he didn't even make any contact to say, "Come and visit me,
Wow.
we're gonna have our goodbyes. We're gonna nothing." And then passed away. And
Wow.
again,
Sorry,
the only
Mark.
reason we knew about it is because this friend of his, not the same friend whose sister was in Scientology, another friend that they grew up, called my mom and said, "We just heard he passed away." you know.
Did you get
So
any
it was
closure with them, Mark? Did you get any kind
no,
of freaking communication or
nothing,
anything? He was just sort of like not
nothing.
he was kinda like a ghost, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, very, very much. Again, my sister always says he used our home like a hotel. Just
Yeah.
ate and slept, and that was it. And my
But didn't
sister
he
and him
love
did
you,
not get
man?
along
Didn't
at all.
did you ever feel any love or, like, how could a freaking
He
father
would
do
say
that? You
he would say to me, him and my sister did not get along at all because my sister's
Mhm.
4 years older, and she started to realize when she was like 10, 11, 12 years old, like really young, that my father was not like the father of her friends. And even if
Mhm.
her friends had stepfathers, or even if her friends had fathers that lived in another country or city, or even if the father had died and they had, whatever, they had some kind of other father figure. So this is a story that my sister will tell. She was into skating, figure skating, and she would be in the I guess they call them the change room, or the whatever room it is, the locker room.
Mhm.
And like, all the fathers would be sitting with their daughters, tying the shoelaces or tying the laces of the skates, and there would be like 10 girls, 10 fathers. My sister would be the only one whose father would not
Wow.
be there in some cases, or maybe not a father, but who knows, older brother, uncle, stepfather, maybe not all fathers or biological fathers, but someone. So my sister would go to tournaments, competitions, whatever you want to call it, and she would be in even larger, locker rooms where there's, like an adult, tying the laces of, you know what I mean, of their
That's so sad,
daughters, and
dude.
giving them encouragement. And my sister would just be like sitting there. And so she I think since she was even like 12, my sister, who was very, very mature for her age, just
Mhm.
distanced herself from my dad. So they hadn't spoken for 15 years. I hadn't spoken to
Wow.
him in 6 years before his passing. And again, no closure, nothing like that, nothing. My dad never reached out to my sister to say anything regretful. He never ever said anything to me that he had nothing. Like, not even when I was seeing him after parents were divorced, which was again 2005 and 6, until I stopped talking to him in 2014. He never really said anything about like, I have a regret, maybe I shouldn't have worked so much. Like he just I don't know. I don't know if he could express that. Maybe he felt it inside. Who knows? Maybe he did. He just could not express emotions. It was just not part of him. He was always trying to keep everything down and, changing the subject and just not interested, very yeah, again, ambiguous emotions, very nebulous, just very aloof type person, not very reliable. Again, my family, we talk about family dinners, okay? My dad was always late, always, every single time, to the point where, and who knows if he was, having rendezvous. Um, but okay, at a certain point, we just said, like, we would wait for my father sometimes for an hour or 2 hours to eat. And then by the time, like, I remember one day the family was somewhere and we're looking at the watch. Okay, my father's supposed to be at 5 o'clock. It's getting to 6. It's getting to 6:30, and just all of a sudden, I think my uncle or something stood up and just said, "We're not waiting for him anymore," and we didn't. And so then I think I was a teenager at the time, or maybe I was an early teenager at the time. And after that point, my father would come into whatever holiday we were. If we were at my aunt and uncle's house, if we were at my grandparents' house, if we were at our even our house, he'd show up late, or a cousin's house or whatever. He would just come in, especially if it wasn't our house, get a plate, and then leave. Like it was insane. And my mom is reminded of a time. She says this a couple times, which is that there was one day. Now my grandmother, so my father's mother, passed away when I was 7. So obviously it was before I was 7 years old. 7 years old before, but she recalled a time. I think it was a Christmas dinner, or who knows, a holiday dinner, and my father was so late that my grandmother was crying at the kitchen table. And then when he came in, no excuse or anything, nothing like that. And he just ate and left. And it was like that. That was the kind of thing that he was. He was just never reliable, never on time. Was he working? Was he with a friend? Was he out at a movie? Was he gallivanting? Was he having an affair? I don't know. No clue. Just where was he? Somewhere. Who knows? I don't know.
Would your
But,
mom and dad often fight over these things, or did she kind
yeah.
of give in
Oh,
to
yes.
it so you would hear that constantly?
Yeah, I have constant memories of screaming. And luckily, my father was never physically abusive,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, no shit.
he was definitely verbally abusive to my mom. I can tell you so many examples of me being in my room, um, playing Nintendo or Super Nintendo,
Hmm.
and just washing out all of that noise and having my mom and dad screaming at each other. And
Wow.
I mentioned that my dad had alcohol problems. So there were two instances where my dad was he had, been drinking very heavily. And my mom woke my sister and I up, and we went to a hotel and we slept 2 nights. It was not back to back, it was two non-consecutive nights. And that's when my dad, like, she gave him an ultimatum. And I think with the help of my uncle, who was also a recovering alcoholic, did get the help, did get help somehow. But again, did he go to a program? Did he not? My mom is not even sure. All my mom knows is that he met with my uncle, and maybe they went to AA meetings, or who knows? My mom doesn't even know. All she knows is that at that night she threw, put all the alcohol down the sink, kitchen sink, whatever beer, wine, whatever he was drinking. And apparently he never drank after that, at least until, and maybe at least as far as she knew. So again, it was always
Yeah.
weird. And then, we went to sleep in this hotel. And I remember then going to my grandmother's and my grandfather's house, and my grandmother and my grandfather yelling at my mother, not blaming my mother, but saying, like, why are you still with him? Like, why is this going on? Like, you should have come here. Why did you go to a hotel? Like, you can. She always dropped us, my sister and I, at my grandparents, and my grandparents were, in their 60s and 70s, looking after
Hmm.
small kids. it was
Wow.
hard, but yeah, screaming fights all the time, Doug. Like
Wow.
that was why
Really?
my house was constantly in chaos. And then my sister, when she was young again, she wanted to literally live with her best friend and their family.
Wow.
And I wanted to live with my aunt and uncle. And the reason was my aunt and uncle's house, which they have their problems, believe me.
Hmm.
My uncle has since passed, but they had problems, but it was always silent. It was always quiet, right? And when my sister would go over to her best friend's house, it was always calm and it was always quiet. Whereas our house there was always something going on. The phone was always ringing. My mother was always screaming on the phone. My grandparents were always coming in and yelling. So it was a lot of just
Jesus, dude.
chaos. So again, why I love silence and quietness and serenity has always been, a virtue of mine.
So it wasn't just your dad that, because he was absent quite a bit, Mark. It wasn't just your
Yeah.
dad. There was constant yelling going from relatives. It's just basically constant noise when you were growing up in your house, even with your dad
Yeah,
not
it's
necessarily
constant.
being totally there.
Think of like a madhouse. Like it was just
Really,
always people
bro?
coming in and out, the phone. My mother would be on the phone for like that was her thing, the chatterbox
Wow.
on the phone. Remember the old
Oh my
phones, of course, had
God.
the long
Yes.
cords, and
Yes.
she would just be screaming on the phone with
Screaming to
who? With
who,
her
man?
friends, with coworkers, with my grandparents, with my other grandparents, with my father, with people screaming and screaming and like, or talking loudly, maybe not just always screaming, but just talking loudly. And then as soon as she hang up the phone would ring again. And it was just like, get me out of here. Like it was
That
just, or I
sounds
would go to a
horrible,
neighbor's
dude.
house, and it was quiet, you know? And so so then
Jesus.
again, my sister kind of got sick of it because, she had like 12 was seeing through the cracks. It took me a little longer to sort of see through things. I was probably into my teenage years, but at that point, like, I know that prom and high school graduation is a very big thing in the United
Mhm.
States, not as much in Canada. So like graduation type stuff, like even when I graduated elementary school in the eighth grade, my dad didn't show up to that. I was in a band practice. I played the tuba in the band practice. My mom came to all those events. My dad didn't.
Oh, that's good.
My mom drove me to baseball. She drove me to soccer and basketball, martial arts. I was golfing and did tennis. My dad was never at those places except for one time, as I mentioned earlier, when he showed up to a little league game for 10 minutes and left. And again, it was one of those things where like all my friends, their moms and their dads were always at their games, like always. And again, if I had a I had a friend whose dad actually left the family and moved to Los Angeles and was a graphic designer and made and I still think maybe he does, but making movie posters. But when he would come back to Toronto, he would go to his son's little league games. He'd go to my friend's little league games. And when my friend flew to Los Angeles, they'd actually spend time together and they would do this, every couple of months because he was at the time he was making these movie posters and doing very well. But like even my friend whose father literally abandoned his family to go to Hollywood to be a graphic designer, you know, um, they did very well there. He had his father.
Did your
So
mom make up, Mark, for being there for you? She sounded like she was a pretty decent person,
yeah,
despite the yelling on the phone and everything. Was she loving and kind of
yeah,
balanced out your absent father?
yeah. 100%. She's my biggest supporter and
Oh, that's
supports me
good.
today. And, I mean,
Good.
yeah, just the fact that I'm even doing a master's degree when I was a kid, I don't think
Congratulations.
many of my teachers or anybody thought I would, make it this far. So, hopefully one day I'll do my PhD. So, yeah, I will say that I'm very lucky to have my mom. I mean, very, very lucky to have my mom. She's absolutely a rock. And listen, we all have flaws. And again, talking about talking too loud or maybe can be very controlling in some cases. But again, it's because of that lack of support
Right.
from having a horrible marriage that just ended itself. Again, my parents did end up getting divorced. It was initiated by my mother. So, you
She
know what I
finally
mean?
had the
But my mom,
strength to was it a long time coming,
yeah.
Mark? Did she finally have to build up the strength to get out of that
Well,
abusive or philandering relation father or husband relation?
so we found out that my dad, this is in 2005 when everything was going down,
Mhm,
2004, 2005. We found out that, I guess, through the sister of a coworker. So my dad again worked again in the car business. He had a coworker, and that coworker had a sister, and the sister had a cousin. It's one of these things. And somehow my dad met the coworker's wife's cousin, and they started having an affair in like the year 2000. And this is now 2003, 2004. My sister was driving in my hometown and spots my dad driving in a car with this other woman. And so we
wow, holy
started to
shit.
ask, you know, and he denied it. So my sister was kind of suspicious. She then sees him again on the same street driving with this woman. And so eventually we found out that my dad had been having an affair for about 4 or 5 years with this woman.
Mhm,
And I think if my miles are correct, I want to say she only lived 2, maybe 3 miles from where we lived, like very close, same town, like just not, you know, not a far distance away. And eventually it kind of came out that they had been having an affair. And then once there was some other things that had happened, we found out that he had taken her to Las Vegas, and we had confirmation about that. Like he had gone, my dad, when he retired from the car business, opened a store where he sold audio equipment, speakers, amplifiers, and all this kind of stuff for, audiophiles. And he did that basically until just a few years before he passed away when he retired. So he did that for about 20 years, and actually had like a storefront in the city of Toronto in 2 different areas. So he would go to these conventions for like audiophile conventions at like the Sands Convention Center or whatever, and he would go there a couple times, maybe biannually or whatever, maybe once every year, once every 2 years. And so he was taking this other woman, and we sort of found that out, and then again confronted, and there was this whole thing, and it was just like, yeah, finally that my mom finally got the evidence. It took months for my dad. He didn't want to leave the house, okay? And then finally he did after my mom basically kicked him out, and went to his mistress's house, and then they divorced my mom divorced him, and he got married with his, other person, and they spent, I guess, at least 15 years, maybe shy of 15 years together till he died. But it was his new family, so he didn't, he obviously had a new family. He never. My sister has 2 kids. He never met my niece or nephew, so he kind of acted that out, I guess, with this new family of his stepson. So you know,
Was it like Mel Gibson or Robert De Niro, who we talked about earlier, where he found a wife that was like 18 or something?
no, no, no. I think she was maybe 10 years, 5 to 10 years younger.
Okay.
And his what would be my stepbrother, we never met, I guess would have been maybe 5 or 10 years older than me. So maybe your age, Doug, maybe a little bit younger, but no, she wasn't tremendously, you know, um, younger in any sense. I think again maybe 10 years, maybe. So, but it's a hard thing, and but I'm on to the
And who
next chapter, and then we just kept going on and on and on. Yeah,
Sorry to hear that, man. Who knows what was going on in your father's brain? Maybe he was just deeply, again, not to justify anything, but
yeah,
maybe it
yeah.
just doesn't sound like he was happy with your mother and didn't really want to be
No,
married and have the kids and the responsibilities that went with it. Which
not at all.
again, there should be a test or a manual or something to make sure that you pot commit and you're not going to pass your
Yep.
trauma onto your kid because anybody can have a kid, you know,
Yeah.
and you could
No,
have many of
absolutely.
them and just fuck them all up or whatever. Back to this, Mark, since I
Yeah.
just wanted to kind of finish this off. This is the blog
No
that Mike
worries.
Rinder put out, and we're talking about family and how Scientology handles Father's Day, Mother's Day, and other holidays. And for all the SPs out there, it goes to another level. SPs is oppressive persons. Those are people that go against Scientology or try to point out, like I did to my parents, that they're in a dangerous situation with Scientology and that it's not the greatest thing in the world. If your Scientology child tried to contact you for Father's Day, they would be expelled from Scientology for committing the high crime of contacting a declared SP. Mark, that's why I went off on that tangent
Yeah, no, I
about
know.
why
Yeah,
my
I understand.
dad feels like you get it, how he cannot contact me. He may want to. This is why there's 15 years of missing time where I know that I came up. I really do know that my parents actually love me. I just know that this
Hmm.
thing prevents them from showing that, or else they're in deep water, right?
Yeah, of
So
course.
can you imagine too, Mark, the struggle my pops must have actually had? Because I again, I could see the love and his caring, but he was so shut down, and he's not about to stand up to Scientology because that was
Hmm.
the thing that gave him all the gains and his way out, and he felt that was giving him everything he needed and all his successes. And then, like I said, he has all the evidence with his black sheep acting out son. So he must have wanted, I know he did many times, to reach out to me, but again, he has to toe the line according to Scientology. So that cognitive dissonance that he took to his grave, man,
Yeah,
I don't hate him, dude. I feel sad because I would not want to
yeah,
pass in this world being an
yeah,
OT freaking 8, dude,
yeah,
believing in
yeah.
Hubbard, getting to the top of the bridge. He'd been up there for 20 years, bro. His whole life was invested in that. And I don't know what happens on the other side, man, but I don't want to find out what happens on the other side, still believing that you're a Scientologist. I've had so many dreams, Mark, about what could happen. Like, I would have nightmares because I had flashbacks every fucking night for years, bro, which is normal coming out of this, right? So
Yeah.
I would have a nightmare that what if what you believe actually is true on the quote unquote other side? So maybe my dad is meeting up with Elron on Target 2. Maybe he will find a body and incarnate into another Scientology family, which would be like the worst
Yeah.
thing he could do. I doubt it. Who knows? But I'm just saying, let's say
Right.
those nightmares kept me going to not rubber band
Hmm.
back to my parents and the codependency and the cult and to keep going an unnatural direction, which felt like it, to force myself to go my own way, dude, because there was no turning
Yeah.
back once I woke up. I just wanted to get my freaking parents out of there, man.
Well, I would say just, with your dad, I mean, once you get that far and you haven't really had that many doubts, I mean, you're in it
Yeah.
or not. You're in it to win it. There's
Yeah.
nothing. And I can't even imagine. I mean, I know that you went to OT3 and that's a high level, but to get to 8, like, and
20 years ago,
there
bro.
you but still you've got to at least, how do you
Question,
push
like,
on? You got to wake up
that's a
every day
great
after
question,
that,
man. That's a great
like
question. A
you're
lot
all
of
done
people
with your
leave at
you're all
OT8,
done,
they
but you get done
die.
with all your BTs, right?
Mhm.
All your BTs are off your body, and then
Mhm.
you're told, your reactive mind was just a reactive mind of your BTs. But
Right.
then the next day you got to get up.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's
I
the little thing
do,
that,
and I thought about it.
like, then you got to be
Mhm.
like, well, okay, I'm off the ship. It's like the
Mhm.
day that you're off the
Oh
ship,
yeah,
you're at
yeah, yeah.
home, and you're like, you go to bed, and you got to go to bed, and then you got to wake up, and like, what do you do?
You
It's like,
want to hear
what's life
something,
like?
Mark?
You
You
know?
want to hear you know what you just triggered about getting off the ship? Guys, the only place you can do OTA is on the free
Oh,
winds.
that's right.
And it's funny you say that, Mark, because I remember this like it's burned into my brain. We met at Bob's Big Boy here in Burbank, which is
All
where
right.
we would
Yes.
always meet. It's kind of a famous place, right? Sometimes you'll see actors
Yes,
and
it
shit
is.
right across from the studios. So it was a big
Yep.
celebration, and my dad was getting home from the free winds, and me and my mom were going there to meet and to celebrate. I'm not bullshitting you, Mark. I described when my dad came back from Scientology the first night, he looked hypnotized. He was already talking their
Yeah.
gibberish. I could see that my dad had a personality and life behind these eyes, and it was literally gone. It was a
Yeah.
classic 1,000-yard stare, 100-yard stare, right? He had that
Yep.
times 1,000 when he got back from the free winds, and it scared the shit out of me. This was a chance for me possibly to get out of Scientology because
Yeah.
my dad, when he would get in these super highs, these super ecstatic winds, these super
Hmm.
dissociated states, it would be a red flag that would scare me. The first
Yeah.
night he came home, and when he did the fucking free winds, and we met at Bob's Big Boy, he showed his little cert and everything, and he was talking about it, and he was super robotic, super happy. And my man, he just looked manic. He was super gone. And my mom and me were all applauding and
Ah,
everything. And you know
Can
what's
you
so sick?
imagine?
That's why I feel so sorry for him, brother.
I
Because what
know.
the fuck? I mean, he paid a lot of money. He didn't want that done to him. He didn't know when you're
Hmm.
dissociated and that cracked in the mind,
Hmm.
compartmentalized. My dad didn't have the wherewithal, which is what Scientology does purposely, for you to actually
Yeah.
be able to figure it out. So, the poor man must have been living in because he tried to do the right thing by my mom, by me,
Hmm.
and by everybody. He's always people pleasing everybody else. I felt like Scientology was his escape where, God damn it, he can have what he wants, because he
Yeah.
never got to express himself. So that was his thing that he had to hold on to. It was the only thing of value that he
Oh.
really had that was his own, dude, you know? Which is so fucking sad because he was
But
he
but
was a good
also,
man despite all
but
that. He really was,
in
man.
addition to that, imagine all the fucking time you spent on OT7.
Yeah,
Like,
he
I mean,
spent
how many years? Do you remember how many
years,
years on OT7? Like,
close
how
to
many do
10,
you can
bro.
recall?
And every 6 months, I
Can
remember
you
every 6 months.
Can you
I can't,
imagine
dude. Thank God, Mark,
10
I got out.
years
I
with
can't.
your
Can you what
unconscious
that does
clusters
to
that you're,
your mind? Sitting in your
and then
room
you go
6
onto the
sessions
ship
a
for a
day.
couple weeks. But then you
Yeah,
go onto the
just
ship for a couple of weeks and they're like, all right, all your BTs are off. Now your
exactly.
reactive mind was part of your BTs. And you're like people in their
Exactly.
head, they have to
They
react to
have to
that.
fucking
Even if they're,
split, dude.
oh my God, oh my God. There's
Something still
like
happens.
one neuron is going, huh?
You have to be
Like,
right, dude.
there has to be
One
in some
neuron,
people's
the
brain,
single neuron that's left,
the
bro, has
single
to be
neuron who's
firing.
like,
The fuck
like
are
it's
you
like a
talking about?
meme. It's like a meme. Like everyone's happy around you in a
And one
bar, and
neuron's going, what?
and everyone's
You
like
haven't,
dressed the same, and you're dressed differently, and you're just
yeah.
like, the fuck?
They
There's
fucked my dad
there
up,
in
Mark,
some
when he came
case,
back from
man.
the ship. They fucked him up. I think
Oh
that now that you
yeah,
say that manicness must have been what you described because guys, in case you don't know what we're talking about or you haven't heard this before, there's two major milestones. Well, actually, three major milestones in
yeah,
Scientology on the auditing
that's
side.
right.
That's clear, operating Thetan 3, which is the first
Yep.
wall of fire, and the
Hmm.
second wall of fire, which is up to OT7. And then the final
Yeah.
one of the negative case gain before you get into the positive gain on OT9 and above, which don't exist, but
Yep.
Scientologists don't know that, is OT8 called Truth Revealed, where you're going to be freed from the amnesia of the whole track. And again, like
Yep.
Scientology, everything's the opposite. So my dad couldn't have been any further in amnesia by the time he finished and came back from the ship. So what they say on Claire is you're trying to get rid of this reactive mind. And a human translation would be a Freudian concept of Mark, are you still there? Or you freeze framed like really cool. You got this bitch and smile, but can you hear me? Okay. We're at a huge distance, guys, and we often freeze or whatever. So I'm sure he'll be back any second, but I'll wait for him to jump in and I'll just keep explaining this. Hopefully he'll come back soon though, because I actually wanted him to hear
Yeah.
this.
Here we go. Here I am.
Okay.
Yeah. No
You
worries.
did a bitch and freeze frame, by the way, bro. When it plays
What was
back,
I?
you had this.
Tone
No, it's a
40.
good smile. No, you had a smile as if you had nothing to do with
My
Scientology.
my
You actually smiled, which you
was
can't
I on
do.
the tone scale? I was in happiness. Yeah.
I'm thinking serenity of beingness. Wait till you see it on the playback, dude. That was a
Of
pretty tight
course.
smile.
That's what I am all the time, is
Of
serenity of
course.
beingness. Yes.
And that's what Scientology preaches. And wouldn't there's no such thing. And thank God I can feel pain and I actually can cry, Mark, because that
I
was the
know.
goal, just to be happy all the time. That's why my dad came back like, I just got to tell you about my wins on OTA. It's fucking terrifying.
Oh.
But anyways, Mark, just real quick, explaining to the audience what these three milestones are and how L. Ron Hubbard
Mhm.
was trolling the shit out of us in Scientology. So in
Yeah.
Scientology, you have to get rid of your reactive mind, which a Freudian way of saying that is you have trauma stored in your subconscious mind. And Scientology says not only this lifetime, but all your past lifetimes. So it's the idea is to get rid of your reactive mind. These are the stimulus response push button mechanisms that are installed in our mind through moments of pain and unconsciousness that we're unaware
Mhm.
of. We get triggered by something in the environment through a sensory apparatus, sight, smell, etc., and we act, we get angry, we don't our mind doesn't work like a computer. L. Ron Hubbard called these held down sevens, where if you could just remove all the trauma and the
Yeah. Yeah.
incorrect actions. Remember that, Mark? He says
I
this
do
right
now
in
that you say it. I
Dianetics.
haven't thought about that in maybe 15 years, but yep,
Kind of
I
makes sense
do.
though, right? Because when
Yeah.
I was reading Dianetics as a kid, these held
Yeah.
down sevens would be the irrational.
Yeah.
This is why I'd be
Yeah.
getting angry, Mark. And then obviously the mind works like a computer. That's a logical explanation that I could
Mhm.
grasp. So if we remove all these traumas, the mind will work like a supercomputer, right? And you won't be
Yeah.
giving the wrong
Exactly.
answers. So when you get to the state of clear, and this is covered in one of the videos on the secret society shit, because me and my mom attested to clear, Mark, at the same fucking month. And we
Oh,
went on the
really? Wow.
stage at Celebrity Center here in LA
Mm,
as a big presentation of a son and a mother have gone clear on the same month, and they made a big to do about it, dude. And we got our little write up in the back of the Celebrity magazine and shit. We thought we were the shit, and again, this bonded my family together tighter because now I was doing
yeah.
finally what not only what my parents wanted me to be to get their
Hmm.
love, but I was fucking going up the bridge, man. So, anyways, the idea is that once you get rid of this reactive mind, the clear cognition, the realization that you have to achieve the state of clear, and it's totally confidential, by the way, is that you have to realize you were mocking up. That means creating or imagining
Yeah.
your own reactive mind. So the
Yeah.
trolling of Hubbard is that it never really existed in the first place, you dipshit. You were making it up. You were doing it on automaticity, what they call automatically. So just stop doing it. That's lost on us,
Yeah.
guys, because it's explained away
Yeah.
somehow that, well, yeah, I have the power now to simply not creating that in the first place. The second milestone is OT3. That's where I got up before I went insane or whatever. And that's the second milestone. And what they tell you is you're going to get rid of all your BTs or body thetans.
Yeah.
You're told this cosmology, this ridiculous story, which again is on the channel under like, I have the whole lecture of Hubbard babbling about what it is, but so I won't explain it.
Mhm.
But the idea is to get rid of these body thetans. And he fucking promises me, Mark, I remember reading it, man, that as soon as you're done with OT3,
Yeah.
no more body thetans. You get to go on to
Right.
something new. And as you
Right.
know, the rest up to OT7 and 7
That
can go on for eternity is
OT4,
all. Oh, you want
dude.
to explain to the
I
audience what that is, dude? Go ahead.
I love
Hilarious.
OT4. I don't.
It's the
OT3 is
best,
great. I
dude.
love OT4. So now
Freaking
you've
druggy
you know
BTs.
who Xenu is. You know who
Yep.
Xenu is. You know the volcanoes. You know the DC8s. You know all this stuff that you can find in South Park. Okay. You start to audit your BTs, but wait, there's more. On OT4, you put them through rehab because in their past lives you had drug addicts. Your BTs were drug addicts in their past life, and you have to audit them off of their drugged condition. But then there's OT5. Wait, there's more. They need an auditor. They're still attached to you, but now they need an auditor. And then you skip OT6 because it's a training course. You
Right.
go to OT7 and they're unconscious. Then you're actually done with your body thetans. Then you get to OT8. And again, you're told basically your reactive mind was the reactive mind of your body thetans. It really, he didn't have anything. I mean, he just didn't have anything. It was all, can you, but I cannot imagine,
Incredible.
Doug, like if you had gone on to OT4, and we know people, like I know people that had gone on to OT5. Jason Begay was one. Also, Claire
Hmm.
Headley apparently was OT5. Mike Grinder was OT5. Lynn Fountain Campbell, OT5.
I
Troy
remember
Christman
Lynch.
got up to OT7. So some of these people, I mean, and it's nothing,
I can't imagine, Mark.
it's
I
not
can't, dude.
them. It's not them, but like imagine you, Doug, you were an OT3. Okay. I'm speaking to an OT3, whether you're an SP or not, you still are an OT3. The sales pitch to get you onto OT4. Okay. That's fine. But then you got to open that course pack and be like, drugs, they're on space cocaine and so they're still on me. But Hubbard discovered those other body thetans were just your preliminary body thetans. You got them off, but now drugs. And then you probably would think to yourself after you're done OT4, okay, no more body thetans. No, you go on to OT5, which costs like $5,000 an hour because they're in clusters. I think it is on OT5 or
Correct.
something
Correct.
like this.
Yep, you got it.
So then, but you can't do it on solo auditing. You have to have someone else do it. Like that's, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Again, listen, it's not the person because you want to get up the bridge. But anyway, just a side note, that literally, I know that people love to talk about OT3. I love talking about OT4. I just,
Great
I
point,
think,
dude.
I think when you look at it and again, this is excusing people that have done OT4 who went up the bridge and whatever, who
Hmm.
fell. We all fell for a con being in Scientology, so it's nobody's fault. But to me, just looking at Hubbard and his deceptiveness and the fact that he really wasn't a genius, he was just a con artist. If you haven't already figured that out by the time you go clear, and you figured out, well, just imagine my reactive mind. Then he presents you with these BTs, and then you get to OT4. To me, if it wasn't so damaging, it would be hysterical.
Great point, Mark.
You know, like really, if it was something like if it was, I don't know, something people did for free for the hell of it. You know, if it was kind of satirical, like a little satirical group that people get into or whatever, and it's like, oh, OT4, but like,
You're right.
again,
It would be
it would be so
hysterical.
funny if it wasn't so tragic.
It's the
You
only
know?
reason I can't fucking totally join in on the
Oh,
laughter from the never ends, because it looks ridiculous and I
yeah,
can laugh about it now. And it's hilarious only if you're outside of it. It's not fucking funny when
yeah,
my dad and a million other thousands of other people are in
yeah.
a hypnotic trance believing this fucking thing, dude. It can drive you
And then you go
crazy.
through it. Well,
Yeah.
Hubbard said they're on drugs, so we're going to put them through rehab. Okay, what's the next one? Well,
By the
you've
way,
got these clusters and stuff, you know, yeah.
one of our listeners,
What kind
by the
of
way,
drugs did the
I love that
BTS
name, by
use?
the way, Purple Groovy. Yeah. Would you care to answer
It,
that,
it would
Mark?
be, I think, so the people that I know that have done OT4 would look at that and say, in your past lives, so you could be going back millions of years, there still was the same drugs that we have on Earth today.
Mhm.
So the drugs that we have on Earth today are like, I guess, planted in by the evil psychs and whatever. So they still would have had, even though, okay, even though this is funny, I mean, this is one of the other things, right? Cocaine. I mentioned space cocaine. Cocaine comes from the cocoa leaf, right? By the way, watch Narcos on Netflix. You right, like you'll get a good
Great show.
education on what that is, with Pablo Escobar. Um, there, as far as I know, and I'm not a scientist, I have never played one on television. I don't think there are cocoa leaves on other planets, but I guess there
You're
were
being
cocoa
logical.
leaves on other
Again, you're trying
planets.
to apply
Um,
logic to
and
Scientology's
so let's
cosmology.
say you come up, let's say you're on, you know, you come up with this life like, oh, well, I was on a planet called Vulcan. I'm a Star Trek fan. 3 million years
Nice.
ago. And yeah, you know what? You're right. Like, this is what you're coming up and auditing. You're thinking, well, yeah, I was doing a ton of blow. And so that's confirmation. Or, yeah, you know what? They had heroin and they had opioids and they had all the drugs, LSD. They all had the same stuff we have today, specifically post 1950, but they had it a million years ago, 2 million years ago. I know you probably know this, Doug. There's a great past life incident that Hubbard talked about where we had walrus bodies. I don't know if you got to that one. There was a wall.
No, I've
We
never
we all
heard
had
that.
walrus bodies.
What is
Well,
that
the
from, Mark?
walruses were.
History of
I
Man
can't
or some
remember if it
shit?
was.
I've never
Yeah,
heard that. That's
or the
hilarious,
free
though.
being. Maybe I'm wrong with the
Doll
walruses.
bodies.
Maybe
I remember
maybe
doll bodies. You remember doll
maybe
bodies,
I'm
bodies
thinking.
in
Maybe I'm
Pawn
getting the mixed. Maybe I'm
with Star
making me
Trek?
getting them mixed up. Yeah, maybe with something else. Anyway, but let's just say different bodies of different beings. But a million years ago, I was on this planet and we were, snorting cocaine.
So funny. And another
And
this is so funny, dude. I have a million things to say on these freaking OT levels. And
oh,
by the way, on that,
Jesus.
Mark, I honestly think I would have started to question, because
Yeah.
what happened is I got up to OT3. I still
Mhm.
only had a couple of acting jobs, small parts. I hadn't broken in yet. And I figured, you know what? I'm broke. I am a powerful OT. I just did the Philadelphia doctorate course for the second time, which is all
Oh,
the black
oh,
magic shit that you think is like
yeah.
blowing you out of your mind. I did so many choruses, Mark, PTSSP, fucking 3 times,
Mhm.
fucking student hat, every chorus. I was trained in audit. I said, you know what? I'm so freaking OT. I'm just going to skip Scientology for a while. I'm going to apply the conditions and fucking get an acting job. And then I'm going to pay for OT4. That was the plan, right? And
Right.
right
Right.
after that, this is something weird in Scientology that, again, me and Marcus covered the other day on the John Travolta and Tom Cruise video. Synchronistically, just by making that postulate, as they call it in Scientology, and this has nothing to do with
Right.
Scientology, guys, so I'm not promoting it. I'm just talking about the synchronistic aspect where you can have your reality seem to be created from your mind by you directly
Mhm.
just deciding something. But 2 weeks after that, Mark, I did get a big part and I was going to pay for
Right.
OT4. That I had a book dropped off on my doorstep, which I'm not going to bore the audience with because I've gone over a million times. But let's just say I was ready to do OT4, and I'm telling you, bro, he fucking
Dude.
promises you no more BTs. And
Yep.
also, what happened on that? Where I'm telling you, if they would have hit me with more BTs, I would have said, "What the fuck?" And then OT5, and then
Yeah.
OT7, get the fuck out of here,
There's
man.
more.
I
And wait,
know.
there's more.
Oh, dude.
All the way to 7. And then it go. And again,
Oh, for
can
10
you
years, dude.
imagine
7 can
the
be
what
7, 10 years, 6 sessions a day.
it can be
Talking to these
more.
fuckers.
It could be more.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I spoke out about this, and we can actually, because I knew someone who was on OT7, and we can
Hmm.
talk about it later if you want to go through more detail. But there's a kind of an infamous Scientologist named Rex Fowler,
I know who that
who,
is. Didn't he blow
yeah, I've
somebody
mentioned it.
away?
Yeah, he killed his business partner, and it was a
Right. I
very
remember that.
horrific and tragic event
That's
that
right.
happened. And I met him. I was actually very good friends with him,
Really?
and we can
Really?
get into,
We
yeah.
can talk about that on
Um,
part 2, which we'll talk about at the end, of this
so
broadcast.
why I'm saying this is because Rex, well, I think Rex was gay. I'm pretty sure he was gay or had some kind of not, maybe he was bi or something. Anyway, that was
Mhm.
always a rumor. However, he was on OT7, and he had been on that level, I think, for more than 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. And it basically drove him kind of insane. And I don't want to
Yeah,
say
ho
the
oft
reason why he
often.
killed his business partner was
Could
because
definitely.
of
Oh, Mark, it
OT7,
definitely could
but
be. People go
it
psychotic.
was it was one of many factors. And I know that he was also very paranoid and stuff like this. So
Mhm.
I can't, and every 6 months you have to go to clear, or the Clearwater, whether or not you
Flag.
have money or not, to flag, and you have
Mhm.
to do these things. I like, honestly, like, just that alone, everything in Scientology from day one is abusive. But once you get to that level, it's like 100 times, 1,000 times even more abusive, because a lot of people whom, get to that level of OT7, not everyone is independently wealthy. They're spending tons and tons
That's a
of money
great
that they
point.
don't
In
have
debt.
in
Yep.
the church. And so to demand that, because you got to go to sec checking, and you got to have these, um what would they call them again? They're
Sec
almost
checks. I
like,
can tell you, Mark. I can tell you because my
it's not
dad
just
did
sec
this every
checks.
6 months.
Yeah, but it's not just sec checks. It's there's another word I
You
was
have
thinking
to
of, but it's more like,
I'll tell you because my
yeah,
dad
yeah,
told me exactly what
yeah,
happens. You have to get
yeah,
your ethics in, you get hit up by every flag terminal and their
yeah,
mother to
yeah,
donate. You have to go through a checklist when you get in there
yeah,
of all the people you have to meet. My dad would tell me it'd be a fucking nightmare, and this is why they moved, to a secluded house with a gate and shit.
yeah,
This is why they won't answer their phone, which you talked about earlier, and they would just take
yeah,
they wanted to screen their calls. My dad, he was a very dedicated person. So he
mhm,
was, like I said, once he bit the bullet on Scientology, he was willing to do whatever they said and would go through hell and
yeah,
back. And he would be there for months, bro. And my mom would be going, "What the fuck? When he coming back?" They promised you 2 weeks, and then it adds up, and
exactly.
then
Yeah,
my dad just gave $30,000 because he had to do all to give to Abel and this place and that place. So it would always cause a freaking argument, an upset, and my dad had to become a pro like my mom on how to handle the
yeah,
finances, never tell Scientology how much money they have, and to
mhm,
try to get in and out of there as fast as possible. But people have horror stories, my friends, of going to flag for this 6 month check every 6 months. And if you're on this
yep,
for 10 years, Bobby Lyons, Mark, my acting teacher,
right,
he was on it
mhm,
for
mhm,
10 years when I finally bailed him and kind of woke up out of the cult. And who knows, he might still be on it. I keep looking to see if he is in the completion because he would come up in the celebrity magazine. I haven't seen
right,
him, dude.
right,
So
right.
he could be 20 years deep on this fucking thing. Guys, can you
And
imagine? Go ahead.
I was gonna just say, like, it's almost like having a mandatory exam and like a testimonial and an interrogation all in the
Yeah,
same
well
time.
said.
It's like you have to go, and like you say, you go every 6 months, but it can take up to 3 months, which means you're back in 3 months. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's
It's
madness and
absolutely
it's super
insane, and it's
expensive.
just, and it's all with your, what they do on OT7 is you're solo auditing BTs that are unconscious. So my whole
Yes.
thing is, and I guess I'd have to talk to someone like Tori who did the level, or someone
Hmm.
who's out and who did the level. But like, what the hell are they? It's just sec checking. It must just be sec
Yeah.
checking, because what else? Like, what are you going to say? Like, hey,
Well, you get checked on the materials.
my
You
I still have a unconscious BT on my shoulder. Like, I guess I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, what are they actually doing? What's the purpose of it? I guess, but yeah,
Well, aside from their ethics, they have to make sure that
Yeah.
you're doing it right. So they'd often go through
Right.
qualifications, Mark, and they would make sure that
Okay.
he was doing it
Yeah.
right. And also during that 6 months, some
Yeah.
processes would go wrong. He wouldn't quite be able to do it exactly right. So they would spend
Yeah.
training as well. First the sec check,
Yeah.
then go through
Yeah.
the whole checklist to give money to everybody or try to skirt out of it. And mostly just training to drill you to be a
Mhm.
better auditor. So when he goes back home, he'll be able to do it properly. Yeah,
And every 6 months.
Tori Chrisman, I think, went absolutely bonkers on that. She has an incredible
Yeah.
story. You know, she actually, I reached out to her a few months ago and she hit me back last week and she said she's going to come
Mhm.
on. I think she actually just forgot, but she does want to come on because
Yeah.
she has an amazing story to share. And I'll ask her
Yeah.
specifically about that. Tori, if you're listening, hit me up, man. I'd love
Mhm.
to schedule that and talk with you. But you know, another thing, Mark, is like, back on that OT4 thing, yeah, I would have definitely been pissed, and I don't know how
Yeah.
people maybe I would have justified 4, but when I got to 5 and there was more, I would just go, "You know what?
Yeah.
Fuck you,
Because I
man."
guess again, you can probably get away with it once. Like that's how I would look at
Once.
it. And again, I am
Yeah.
I'm thinking rationally, so I'm not
Again, you're
thinking
not being a
that way.
Scientologist.
But let's just say, okay, so it says you're done with BTs, but you also know if you've been in Scientology for a long time,
Mhm.
nothing really goes as planned because it's so bureaucratic and
True.
so inconsistent, and so
Very
people
true.
are so fucking incompetent that you probably think, okay, yeah, no more BTs, and then eventually you get talked into it. So it's like, listen, you're done with the wall of fire, but guess what? They'll give you some pitch. So again, the first time I can see people, but you're right. I'm sure that's not necessarily the one they give all the guff for. excuse, excuse me. It's probably OT5 and then OT7 because then it's like, okay, we're
Yeah.
going to this again. And I'm sure the answers that people get that just before they do 5 or just when they get on 5 and 7, it's the same stuff. It's like, just don't worry. It's probably the last time.
Yep.
It's,
That's what they
I
undoubtedly
don't
tell
know.
them. No, I think you're right. They
Yeah,
just
and
tell them.
I guess it's you because obviously you did auditing, so you did the grades. But I can
Mhm.
imagine going through AOC Straightwire up to clear, you're probably told things that maybe it's the last time you're going to do something, and then something comes up again, right? Did you ever have that
Not totally,
experience?
Mark, because the grades were different. On grade 0,
Right. Right.
you handle
Yeah.
communication. At the end of that, you're told you're gonna be
Yeah.
able to communicate freely with anyone on any subject. Grade 1 is
Yeah.
problems, and grade 2 is ARC breaks, etcetera. So,
Hmm.
no,
Hmm.
dude, the big kicker on the OT levels, it would have been the first time that I was actually doing the same thing twice with the BTs, the recurring
Yeah.
theme all the way
Yeah.
up to 7.
Okay.
So, no, I did feel like I was doing different things. Definitely,
Okay.
up to clear.
Well, that's probably when Hubbard actually had something to
A
offer,
nervous
and then he just
breakdown times 10, and then just
yeah.
he literally had nothing to offer. I think he was actually
Yeah.
he got off on tricking people, and you said especially the most
Mhm.
intelligent. So I think he could have
Yeah.
come up with something better, but I think he was trolling us. I think he wanted to see what he can get
Yeah.
away with. And by the way, guys, the very end,
Mhm.
OT8, um, truth revealed, what my dad would have done and why he was so spaced out when he came back is you take a list of all the beingnesses, the people that you think that you were in your past lives, and you go
Mhm.
down, you eventually find out that none of these were your past lives. They were the
Yeah.
body thetans. So now the EP of that one is you now know who you're not, and you're
Yeah.
willing to find out who you are. So you
But
literally start that's exactly the state of mind the day you entered Scientology. It's the
yeah, so
ultimate troll, dude.
they're gaslighting you. They're also gaslighting your
Exactly.
past life because you're so certain.
Yeah,
Like you're
gaslighting, exactly.
so. I had past life. I had 2 past lives when I was in just doing Dianetics auditing.
And you believed him,
And
right?
if that's who you're exactly, because that's
Yeah,
who you're supposed to be. You are not
exactly.
you're not a meat body. You're a thetan. You're thetans. Can you imagine double gaslighting somebody? Because it's not just all the things that you thought you were, you're not, and now that's the
Yeah.
truth. Come on, it's
This is
oh,
why people,
I can't
Mark,
even
go
imagine.
crazy. They
Yeah,
contract cancer because of the stress, or they feel like
yeah,
they have to join the Sea Org because there's nowhere else
heart
to go. Your
attacks.
reality gets
Yeah,
squeezed, heart attacks. Your
yeah,
reality gets so squeezed and your options by the time. And then if you get up to OT8, you have to have a spouse that's also OT8. So my dad was constantly, we were always having to push my
mhm,
mom's ass up the bridge. She only got up to clear as far as I know, but Who knows
Mm.
during the last 15 years if she got at the OT levels or who the fuck knows. On that
Oh.
too, Mark, what was I going to say? Oh fuck, I forgot what I was going to say. I wanted to take up something here though. Apparently we have an argument about Alan Watts. See, I remember coming across his book and talking about the skin encapsulated ego and how reality happens 2 centimeters in the back of the brain, what we see
Okay.
outside of us.
I've
Yeah, I
heard
remember.
that before, actually.
And
Yeah.
then Alan Watts apparently is a Freemason drunk compared to Uma. I don't think everybody's a Freemason. That I don't know anything about Alan Watts being a Freemason. Boy, we agreed. Yeah, we're back to the parent thing. On those OT levels, like I said, Mark, I think at 4 or at 5 at the most, I would have actually cracked because there's no way I could justify those freaking BTs. One
Mhm.
of the things that happened too is I attested the past life clear. So I did all the grades normally. And
Mhm,
also, by
mhm,
the way,
mhm.
Mark, I talked about this with Marcus, who worked at the Ventura mission as a staff member, and he was able to give me the intel on the fact that they would charge me and or my parents a lot more money and keep me in session a
Mhm.
lot longer and try to never let me go to do the advanced levels because they were
Oh
simply
my god.
sucking as much money. So the grades took me, I found out after I got out, 5, 10 times as long as normal people, months and months and months
Oh
just
my
for a single
gosh.
fucking grade, dude, running every process, which you're not necessarily supposed to do. So I did the grades like solidly, bro. And then I attested to past life clear, which was another crazy ass cycle, which I talked about later. And
Mhm.
then talk about, that you're not supposed to invalidate someone's case, right? Ever.
Yes,
That means
of
if you
course. And
fucking,
that's
Mhm.
I
Oh, go
mean,
ahead.
people do it every day, but yeah.
Yeah,
Go
that's
ahead, Doug,
a
sorry.
huge crime, right? So guess who invalidated my case, bro? I'm fucking already having trouble on OT3. And just to let people know, what I would do is I would go into my apartment, go into a locked room that was checked out by a Sea Org member to make sure it's secure. I had a roommate at the time,
Mhm.
so he just knew I was going in to do this weird shit, and he was a Scientologist, but he didn't know what I was doing. So I would go in every day, 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions a day, talking to imaginary beings called body thetans, and then get them to go away.
Mhm.
And thought I was like I thought it was amazing because I believed it. And I thought I was
Of
literally
course.
freeing people spiritually. But during
Mhm.
that, I got a phone call and I remember taking it up after coming out of an OT3 session. And the gal was my CS, which is not even case supervisor, the person who goes over your case. They're never supposed to call you or talk to you directly. Well,
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
told me that it looks like because I kept having problems on OT3. And they said, you know what? Perhaps it looks like, we checked your folders. You might have to come in and actually do NED, which is the proper way to become clear. You might not
Mhm.
be a past life
Mhm.
clear. That's when I really started to lose it. And that's why I went crazy. First on OT2, that kind of set me up to snap my mind. And OT3, I went
Mhm.
bonkers. And when she invalidated me, I fucking lost my mind because I worked so hard, Mark, to go through all the bullshit about the eligibility. You have to tell them every goddamn
Yep.
secret you've ever done. It was such a, and then
Mhm.
the solo chorus is like a PhD trying to learn how to use that fucking meter, staring at the
Yep.
wall, doing drills where you have to memorize all this bullshit. I mean, it's really hard, right? So I fucking worked my ass off to get up there. And in one swipe, she's just like, yeah, I don't think you're a past life clear. You got to kind of start in the middle. And that's when I really started to fucking say, you know what? As soon as I finish OT3, I'm going to go out and get an acting job. And then I'm going to back away. I'm OTing up. I'll pay for OT4 when that happens. And like I was saying,
Mhm.
Mark, synchronistically, about 2 weeks later, I got cast on American Heirs, which was like this really cheesy soap opera. It's my first break. I did get signed with a big agency and I was like guaranteed to have a career basically. And of course,
Mhm.
when I woke up out of that, I then could barely stop talking to my agents, my friends, anybody that listened about how what the fuck just happened to me. I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off. But at least I was out of Scientology. I didn't have to confront any more fucking imaginary BTs. And I didn't give them the money for
Mhm.
OT4, Jesus Christ.
Well, blessing in disguise, I guess, right? Like,
Yeah, I guess.
because
I lost everything,
OT4,
but
well, I mean, again, listen, it sucks. No, I know. I mean, but then
trust me,
again,
I prefer it, Mark. It's
you didn't go to
exactly
OT4. I mean, listen, there's always a silver lining on OT4. Who knows? I mean, if you didn't do well on OT3 and they told you about OT4, it's not like that would have gotten any better. You might have gone 3, 4 times, 5 times
true.
worse. So at least as worse that you got, that was the that was it. So who knows? I mean, it's something that you'll never know, and at the same time, it's
Yeah.
probably ended up being for the best.
It had to
Because
be,
who
Mark. It
knows?
was it was my destiny, because I
Yeah,
look back and I realized there
yeah,
was sooner or later I think I was going to break, and it was going
yeah.
to require losing everything. There was no way around that. But I got to tell you, brother, I don't give a fuck, because it woke my
Yep.
eyes up, not just to Scientology, but the world we live in, Hollywood, and everything. I really went down the rabbit
Uh,
hole, because I said, I'm never going to get burned again. And if I can be lied to on this scale, unbeknownst to me and completely outside of my awareness, I needed to know what else I don't have correct about this world.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm thankful for that journey. I wouldn't take that back for anything, but man, at the time I didn't know it was happening. I felt like, what did I do that was so wrong? I worked hard. I was an inethic Scientologist. I have a loving family. I did everything right. And I
Hmm.
was like, God, what? I wasn't really talking to God, but I was talking to somebody when I said, what the fuck? Help me figure out. Cause I didn't understand, Mark. I still believed in Hubbard. I'm like, how is he a black magician and a liar? I couldn't wrap my mind around that book showing me that I was in a con, but it took years
Hmm.
to understand what I had done that was so bad. How did this happen? Blah, blah, blah. Right.
Yeah,
And
I understand.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, Juliana, they changed the original OT8 and the Antichrist document,
Hmm.
which is the original. It's on the channel
That's right.
under OT8, The Secret Truth of Scientology, if you want to see that document. The reason they took it
That's
out
right.
is because it was so offensive to. Now, you can't be a Christian or any other religion and be a Scientologist, despite them
That's
saying that
right.
you can. They'll beat it out of you by the time you get up. However, Christians
Hmm.
in particular seem to be able to hang on to their beliefs and then with anyways. And when they got up, some of these people got up to OT8, they themselves were flabbergasted, those that still held the Christian
Hmm.
belief, and also the Christian community in general, when they found out about it, freaked out. So this is so bad and such a bad PR move that David Miscavige changed it in the late
Hmm.
80s, because I believe this came out in 86, and David changed it quickly
Yeah.
after that. But a few people did do the original OT8, including Jesse Prince, I believe, and a couple others, and they have confirmed that, in fact, that's the big revelation where he says, yeah, I'm Lucifer incarnate. Jesus was a pedophile, and get on
Yep.
board, because this is the big secret I've been holding back from you. Just a slight bad PR, right?
Yeah.
Jesus
A little
Christ,
bit. But then again,
Mark.
that Scientology is all about bad PR. I mean, they're bad at PR. So there you go.
And yet they still can actually get people in to this day. Apostate Alex,
Somehow.
got in
Hmm.
like 2000, not that many, or 2010, but and he'd even learned about
Yeah.
some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I did a little bit too. You know.
I wish we could show. I wish we could really give the people the experience without them going down to Scientology, about how sensible it really seems, because this guy
Yeah.
stole from the best. He knew a lot of the shenanigans of the in-depth government mind control project. So he had all the
Hmm.
tools to be a master manipulator. You add that with the fact that he's an expert hypnotist and pretty well schooled on the
Hmm.
occult, and an absolute
Yep.
genius in the way of being a con artist, like kind of one of the best. Man, I'm telling you, the way they lead you in there is pretty impressive. Just clear your words and this and that. You have no idea it's leading to the space opera fucking crazy shit.
You wouldn't.
Thank
You
you,
wouldn't even
Connie. I
get that
appreciate
on the
that.
first day. Yeah.
No, it's like boiling a frog in cold water, and you turn up the heat slowly
Yeah.
but surely. Mark, let's
Hmm.
finish this thing from
Sure.
Mike real quick, this Father's Day thing, and then we'll
Of course.
answer some questions, some things that I have
Yep.
started, and then you can tell people what we're going to be doing in part 2 and 3, because we've already been
Absolutely. Yeah.
going for 2 hours, bro, and we
I know.
barely got scratched the surface. So,
Hey,
but
it's
anyways,
okay. This is what it's about. I
it's been
love
a
talking
great
to Doug
conversation.
because you never know where it
Oh,
goes, and that's the point of it. I love it.
I love talking to you too, man. I mean, the time, I can't
Yeah.
believe that was 2 hours, dude. Okay. So real quick, guys, on this is a blog that Mike Rinder put out, and I'll link it in the description if you like to see it, as well as everything else we talk about here. But we're talking about how Scientology handles Father's Day. And if you're an SP, this control goes to another level. If your Scientology child tried to contact you for Father's Day, they'd be expelled from Scientology for committing the high crime of contacting a declared SP. Again, that was what my father was thinking, and why he could never let his guard down and talk to his own son. And then it says, yet here is how they try to present themselves to the world, stock shot photos and all. And
Yeah.
look at how lovely this is, Mark. Father's Day Arts and Crafts Workshop and Family Festival, Sunday, June 16th, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., etc. Right? This is how they get new people in and around LA in particular. And check this
Oh,
out. Of course, they will use it as an excuse for a quote special briefing, which is
yeah.
Scientology euphemism for a fundraising event. So It's
Mm-hmm.
check this out, Father's Day brunch and briefing, because you and I
Oh,
know, Mark, that is in addition to hanging out with our pops, we certainly want to have a briefing. Enjoy a delicious brunch and hear exciting news from two senior tech terminals from the Church of Scientology International. Again, how better could you spend a Father's Day? Hey, Scientology, how about this for a gesture on Father's Day? For just one frickin' day, grant an amnesty and let every father disconnected from a son or daughter and every son or daughter disconnected from their father communicate with
yeah.
one another? Nah, we know that's never going to happen. It would violate your quote, firmly held religious beliefs. It seems the only way to solve the dilemma is to force change from without. Well said. So, to
Yeah.
all the dads and kids out there who suffer from the cruelty of Scientology disconnection today, use it as a motivation to redouble your determination to bring the abuses of disconnection to an end. And to all the
Mm-hmm.
dads and children out there who are able to celebrate Father's Day, definitely cherish it. Don't take that bond
Yeah.
between you for granted. You may never know how important it is until it's gone. And this is coming from a man,
Yeah.
Mike Rinder, who's been
Mm,
disconnected from almost all of his family, from what I understand,
yeah.
for simply having the audacity to understand and have the courage to admit that he had been conned, figure it out, and simply want to speak out about it. So
Yeah.
sad,
And
dude.
the only thing I want to add about these briefings and
Please.
all this crap
Mhm.
is when you get to become a staff member, you read a policy about gimmicks. That's what they
I
literally
remember
call
that.
these things. They're
I remember
gimmicks,
that.
and you will fall for them. I remember the very first gimmick that I fell for because I had I guess what it is. What's the word, Doug? I not initiated, but it's like
I
not
lost
even
my OT
postulated,
powers. I can't read your
but
mind.
I
So,
know
mhm,
I spoke out. I said that I guess whatever the word is, I forgot now, that I
mhm.
I didn't really want to be on course,
Gimmick?
and I was
Were you
kind
talking
of
about gimmick?
no, not gimmick. It's like I guess I postulated or I initiated, whatever the word is. It doesn't matter.
Postulate
But
would work.
I originated. Took a while there because my
I got that.
Scientology brain is
I got
one
that.
neuron is still there.
Yep.
But okay, I originated to the course supervisor that I didn't like Scientology. I didn't want to go back. So the first gimmick I fell for was a quote unquote free technical consultation with a professional auditor.
Oh,
And
yes.
they got me right back in. So
Yep.
anything where they're saying two tech people from it's all bullshit. They just want you to go in and spend
Good
money.
point.
It's and they call it a gimmick like that.
You're right. He fucking
But you
called
don't
it
know
that.
that
That's why we
if
have to be
you're a
under,
public,
he
but
reframes
if
it
you're
in
a
a way
public,
that,
you don't know
yeah.
that. You won't
Not o
know that
it
as a public, only when you're on staff or
That's
SEER.
a great,
It's
I do
ridiculous.
remember, reading that actually, Mark. So I was only on staff
Oh,
briefly, and I know what you're talking
right,
about,
right.
but I remember
Mhm.
justifying these kind of things where people are going, "How can you" it says upper indoctrination. It says it's a gimmick. It says this and that.
Yeah.
The way this motherfucker framed it, and again, this is why I go back to the TRs and the early choruses. Guys, we are not thinking
Mhm.
logically. We're thinking trans logic. So in that logic, you
Yeah.
can make everything fit. So he can say the most
Mhm.
ridiculous stuff, but you can't make sense of it because you guys are seeing logically. We're not thinking logically. We're thinking in a literally trans logic, which I'm going to break
Oh,
down or whatever. Let's take some
yeah.
questions, Mark, as we
Sure.
kind of wind down here. So, Kim White. So, if you've ever been a victim and punished for something you pulled in for something you did in the past, you later find out that you were punished for something your body Thetan did. Do you want to explain that or take that?
Okay, so if you ever been a victim of punishment, I basically yes. I mean that when you get to OT8, the answer is yes, because essentially what you're talking about is if I'm in an auditing session and I'm in a Dianetics or a Scientology auditing session and I'm remembering a past life, it's not the past life for what I think is my one Phaeton. And you have to remember, L. Ron Hubbard compared this is your body, like if the thumb is our human body, the rest of our body is our Phaeton. So that is how big the Thetan is.
Hmm.
Okay, that's scale. So I'm 6'5". So my thumb is 6'5". What would I be? I'm not good at math, but I'd be a giant, right? So originally you're going through Scientology thinking it comes from a single source. It comes from your giant one Thetan. Okay. But once you get to OT8, you realize you have, I don't know how many thetans you're supposed to have, thousands, millions, I don't
Yeah.
know. And they're
Thousands for
all
sure.
attached to you, at least thousands, right? And
Hmm.
so if let's say I concoct some idea that I don't know, I fought in the French Revolution, I fought in the Second World War, I fought in the War of the Roses, I was at the Battle of Hastings, I lived during the time of Jesus, I was an ancient Sumerian, okay? And then I went
Hmm.
even back further and realized I was a coke addict 3 million years ago in a walrus body. Whatever it is,
Nice.
okay? Whatever it is, all of that are coming from your BTs, not your supposedly giant Thetan. So he undercuts and
Yeah.
contradicts himself as you go along, and you just accept it because you're convinced that that L. Ron Hubbard gained new research. And of course, this is where the idea of pseudoscience comes in, where you can contradict yourself and you can completely undercut whatever idea is because of new research.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's not because of new research. It's not like in science when 50 years ago people thought you got an ulcer because of stress, but now we know you get ulcers because there's a tear in your stomach, probably because of stomach acid, right? They can't coexist anymore. We know that stomach ulcers aren't caused by stress. We know that they're caused by an acid, right? So it's like he's trying to I guess you could say put it in like a scientific kind of perspective where, oh well, we're just changing things because we're updating, and so if we say,
Exactly.
oh, this is you and this is your Thetan, but we went to OT8 and it's different. But again, it's not like that. So I guess to answer your question very simply is yes, and you have to disassociate as well and be
Exactly.
like, okay, I guess, and then keep going on to the next level, because that's all you really are in Scientology, is you're a wallet, or your free labor. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
You either pay
Definitely.
or you give your labor. And so that's why people keep doing these things, is either because they want your money or they want your labor. And again, everything that we're talking about here, from all the OTs, everything really, again, this is self-explanatory, but it doesn't mean anything anyway. And this is why, like Doug was saying, maybe he was just trolling us.
That's a
It's
really
pretty
good
simple.
question, Kim, because I never thought
Yeah,
about that. But yeah, again, you're
yeah,
thinking logically, but by the time we get up,
right.
first of all, only
Yeah,
5%, 10% at the most actually get
yeah.
up to OT1 and beyond.
Hmm,
So you
hmm,
have to
hmm.
understand that that took me about 10 years at least to get up to OT1. So imagine the amount of indoctrination. My dad had the
Yeah.
ultimate library, Mark. Like when I regressed back to the
Mhm,
nest
mhm.
in my early 20s when I pot committed to Scientology, I would
Right.
go into my dad's library and he had 3 huge bookcases full of the fucking
Mhm.
tech volumes. That would be, he had the red volumes, the green volumes, the new ones, the old ones,
Of
every
course, of
freaking
course.
lecture, exteriorization, the phenomena of space, like every esoteric
Mhm.
tape lecture and book. And so I was downloading this shit into my mind every freaking day, man. So by the time that I realized that, I mean, I never got up to OT8 where you realize all the body thetans and the past lives that you thought you were that of the body thetans
Yeah.
memories. So you have to get all
Mhm.
the way up at the top to even ask yourself the question. And by then you're so fucked up, you're not going to ask this question. But yeah, you're right. If the
You're
body
right.
thetans, you were being
Absolutely right,
punished
Ken.
all the way up the bridge for shit that your freaking
Yeah,
body thetans were doing.
yeah. Because
Again,
if you
Kim, you're
originate
thinking too
something,
logically, but that's
if
such
you
a good
originate
question.
something like, I'll give you just a very brief example. So if you originate
Hmm.
something like I did in my Dianetics auditing session, I thought I was a soldier in the Spanish-American War. I had this
Hmm.
experience where I was charging a fort, whatever. I don't know if I
Hmm.
think I was Spanish. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That right there, I'm told in Dianetics that's the bridge between Dianetics and your Thetan. But again, if I go to OT8, that Spanish War charging up a hill, whatever the hell I was doing, that actually does come from one of my BTs. It's not me; it's a BT. So yeah, I know we
There you
kind of went
go.
around on the question, but it's a good question, so
It's a
that's why.
great
But yeah, thank you,
question.
Kim.
And again, way too logical of a question to ask a
Yeah,
Scientologist. But that
yeah.
if you were to actually ask a
That's
Scientologist
why
that
we
was
went
at
into it
OT
a little
7,
bit, You made us
exactly.
think, which is great.
Exactly. I don't think that would work, by the way, Kim, if you tried it on a fully
No,
indoctrinated OT, because they would just dismiss it. They
no.
wouldn't be able to, like, for example, when I was told that, on the OT3 story, The math is off about when the volcanoes and Earth kind of even existed. The math was off, but it never even
Yeah,
crossed my mind because by that time, the cosmology of Earth itself was reframed. So Hubbard's
exactly.
reality and space opera becomes your reality,
Hmm.
not what science says. So it doesn't matter what
Exactly.
science says. Hubbard is right.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's any religion. That's why you can't talk logically with what creationists or whatever. I think they said the Earth has been
Yeah.
here for 6,000 years. Like, yeah,
Young Earth
it's
creationists.
mind
Yeah.
blowing to try to understand how someone can believe that, but you're perhaps missing the steps of indoctrination that may put them into an illogical state of mind.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyway. So if you guys have any final questions, now would be the time to ask. I'm going to go through the ones that were starred. Just real quick, thank you, lady, and it's really good to see you. I'm so touched by the maturity to do that. You will just have to read between those lines from your mother. Her hands were tied. I
Yeah.
totally understand. I feel bad for my mom because her motherly instincts, again, definitely told her that something was wrong, but she wanted to
Yeah.
kind of save the family, and also she had her own vested interests too, to not be on her own and have to raise the kids. So what the fuck is she going to do? And I talked about in the episode called Dear Mother, Dear Father, where my mom was caught with a conundrum. The fuck would you do if your spouse who you love and you're getting along just fine out of the blue comes home and says, I need to take to Scientology, borrow
Hmm.
$10,000 from the brother, or we might have to get a divorce. And my mom's scratching her head going, what the fuck am I supposed to do, man? You know, that's the dilemma that he presented to her. And part of that, by the way, Mark, was that my mom's a little controlling and manipulative. So he, again, since he
Hmm.
never had his own thing to kind of call his own in life, that was his escape, not only from the wife, but everybody. And that was some power he could fucking finally have, something for him, which
Yeah.
is really fucking sad. The
Yeah.
best you could do, the best you could hope for is to have some closure with your dad. You did well, the best you could. Thanks, Bella. Yeah, it was definitely more than it's better than my dad leaving thinking that I hated him and I wanted to kill him, or anything. Still, that was handled a long time ago. Doug, you were ill with cause cult mind control brain fuck. Thanks for your helping others. Thanks for the comment, Lafayette out of whack. I assume that's in reference to Lafayette Hubbard. Imperfect closure is closure too.
Mhm.
Amen. It sucks that it's not the child's fault, but it does real damage to their brain. Yeah. Children are the real casualty of this fucking thing because they didn't ask to
Yeah.
have their parents, especially Scientology, inculcated into their mind. Mark looking thin. That's what I said, man.
Thank
He
you.
looks like he lost 10 years too since the previous interviews that we did. You look really good, my man.
I still got some pounds on me. Don't worry. If I blow down here, don't worry. But yeah,
Hey man, take the compliment. What kind of drugs did the PCs use? Space cocaine. I thought didn't we
space coke,
no, that's a
LSD, pot, everything that we have here. Yeah.
they used all the drugs that L. Ron Hubbard, as much of an imagination that he had, he didn't really have any
Yeah.
imagination, or else he would have come up with something besides the BTs. But it's explained, Purple Groovy, that basically everything we know today, that's basically what was happening millions and trillions of years ago, all over the multiverse. It was all kind of the same
Yeah.
as Earth, which makes no sense onto it at all. How can the BTs bother you if they're druggies? They would just be hanging out. Well, the
Well,
idea
they're still
is,
attached to you, yeah, and
yeah, explain that.
they're attached to you, and they're still attached to you. So you go through OT3, and you're doing your whatever it is, and then they're still there. That's the thing, and they
Because
have
they're
their past
unconscious.
lives,
You
and
can't
they're on.
contact
Yeah,
the druggies on
exactly.
OT3. It's all
Yes,
about
yes,
removing enough charge. So when you go
yeah,
up the grades, it's all about removing the charge so you can confront
yeah,
the reactive mind to go clear. Then as soon as you go clear, you're in the non-interference or danger zone before you get up to OT3 where your life can go crazy on you, because now you've relieved enough charge where you've opened up your subconscious to this. You're going to be told on the OT3 the big incident, the big third dynamic. That means group, engram, the big trauma that happened to all of us a long time ago that put us into the matrix, into this prison planet. So
hmm,
that's available to you, he says, when you're clear. And until you get up there, you're in danger of having that unconscious content react upon you. So
yeah.
the
And
reason
there's
that the
also
beat,
processes. Sorry, Doug, I don't mean to interrupt, but there's also
no, please.
specific processes. They don't mean anything, right? But there are
Mhm.
specific processes where you're supposed to contact them. So you get the specific processes to contact your BTs on OT3, and as you know, when you go shoo them off. But then on OT4, they add the level of drugs. So there's other processes that you have to do where you think you're getting in contact with them specifically for
Yes.
the drug issue. You run those processes and then they come off.
Exactly, and that's
I
why,
I know it doesn't make any sense, but that's
I
that
think you explained it.
technically there's a little whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
NED stands for New Era Dianetics, and OT4 or OT5 and above is
Yeah.
New Era is NED for OTs or New Era
Yeah.
Dianetics for OTs. It's a way of saying running. It's kind of like running Dianetic processing as an OT. Again, I know it's
Yeah.
confusing, guys, and the terms sound crazy, but
I
that's the
know.
best we
I
can
know.
explain it. The idea
I
is
know.
that you can't contact the OT4 druggies before OT4 because you have to get rid of the ones that you can consciously contact because of the charge you've relieved. And then once you finally have the power
Yeah.
and you've relieved enough, then you can. The reason there's more BTs on 4 and above is because they were simply unconscious and you didn't have the OT power to locate the druggy ones
Yeah.
because they're super dead. It's kind of a cool story, dude, if it was just a movie and not
I
taking my
know.
parents away and shit.
I
Jesus
know.
Christ. As far as I know, yeah, that's right on OT on
Antichrist.
him
Yeah.
being the Antichrist, and we covered that one. And it's my what's up, escaping the cultiverse? It is my understanding that Mike was declared for blowing. He then spoke out. All
Yeah.
right,
That's right. Yeah.
Mark, how far did you go?
Yeah.
Did you become
Not
an
OT.
OT, young
So
man?
I did not, but of course I have read Revolt in the Stars, which is a treatment, and I have read and have also had former OTs sort of explain, like Doug, the steps of the OTs. My basically biggest or highest thing was to do the introductory services. I was only in for 3 years. So I did
Still a
a
long
number of what's
time.
called life improvement courses. I
Hmm.
also did a number of extension courses from books. Every book that Scientology has, if you look at all the basics, there's a preliminary course or preceding course that goes with it. So I probably did at least 15 courses or more. But
Wow.
essentially, my highest level of auditing, I guess if you want to say it, was method one wound clearing. I never did the Purif, but I did do method one. And then as far as staff courses, I did what's called staff status 0, 1, and 2. And then I got onto what is called a mini hat for the executive establish or for the establishment officer mini hat. So really, if you look at the grade chart, I'm still at the very bottom, but I had one couple hours of method one, which is like the first kind of thing that you kind of do in, I guess it's the training, right, Doug? Method one is a part of the training, I think. First step on
Yes.
training or first step on yeah. So I like did, and that was only because I was so, I guess, out of effed up. They gave me method one word clearing. So unfortunately, I'm not privileged enough to be a clear, and I will never go OT because of past incidences. And unfortunately, I am not considered to be an able person because I have disabilities and I have chronic illnesses, and so they don't want people like me. They want to make the able more able, and they consider me to be non-able. So fuck them.
Yeah, anybody that leaves Scientology is, according to them, non-able. Cal says I
Yep.
wasn't on the OT level, and as a kid, we hated to go inside and getting calls daily when we come to study and all. But still, believe my mom because she was an O because she was OT. She
OT.
spoke about it since she OT denied. Didn't quite get that, Cal. Did you? Do you get that, Mark?
Hmm. I think he's probably an ex, right? So yeah, maybe
Yeah,
he
sounds like he had
had
an
some
OT
experience of that.
mom.
Yeah, it was just the last sentence. Sorry, Cal. We didn't get just the last sentence, but we got your first part, and yeah, looks like you had OT, you know, yeah, family and stuff. What am I studying at Hungary? Have you seen the org there? I'm studying my master's degree in humanities. I just
Oh,
don't want to be too
awesome.
specific if that's okay, but I am studying a
Sure.
humanities subject. I will tell you that I'm a historian, so history is part of my master's degree. That was my BA. And I have not yet been to the ideal org in Budapest, Hungary. I know where it is. I honestly just have not been there yet. It's actually outside of the city. I believe it's on the Buda side, which of course is on the west part, but it's not in like a downtown area. It's not in a city center area, which we have multiple ones here in Budapest. Every district has a city center, but it's relatively outside, and I think it takes a little while to get there. at least for public transportation, which is actually quite good in Budapest, at least 40 minutes to an hour. So maybe I'll go one day. I just haven't had the opportunity yet, unfortunately. Would they know me? Probably not, but they might yell at me in Hungarian and I can yell at them back at Hungarian, and who knows? Might be a nice little cathartic event. But thank you for the very much for the question. And yeah, escaping the cultiverse, eh? I think we got a Canadian, eh?
Yeah.
I think that's what it
Yes,
refers to, eh?
exactly.
Strange
Exactly.
brew.
And I think Gabrielle's going to be coming on shortly. We've been communicating. So Gabrielle,
Oh,
oh
nice.
yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna talk on Monday. So please subscribe to her channel if you haven't
Fellow
too, because
Canuck.
she has content that's coming out. And she was the
Oh,
Canadian
cool.
ED, man. She held a very high position, and she's done
Oh,
interviews
yeah.
with Apostate Alex as well that you
Yep.
can check out.
Yep.
All
Of
right.
course, of course. Yes, I know. I know. She's Hungarian, so if it's the same woman from Vancouver, right? Yeah.
I'm
And
sure you've
of
seen her.
course, now I know who you are. Thank you so much for the question.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us, Gabrielle. And congratulations on getting
Yeah,
out and
thank
sharing your
you.
story, because it takes a lot of freaking courage. I think this is a perfect place
Absolutely.
to end off, Mark. And would you like to tell
Mhm.
people about part 2 and part 3 about what we're going to doing, if you remember? And if
Yes.
not, I'll sure. And then we'll take up your
I
question, Uma, in 1 second after he explains. But thank you.
Of course, of course. So, Doug and I love coming on Doug's channel. I'm so very, very happy that Doug also gets a lot of responses and stuff. So, just because I'm a little bit more private on social media, and I don't want to sound like it's a secret society to be my friend on social media or anything, but I tend to keep it a little bit quiet on there. So usually, if I know someone or if someone's a friend of a friend, usually I will friend that person. And the reason I just do this is just because of, bad experiences in the past. And I know that sometimes when that comes up, um, it's like if someone who's a really good person and really good-willed, I might have to not accept the friend request. And that can also lead to people maybe who want to ask me questions and have no other way to ask a question. So maybe they go through Doug or something like this. So I thought it would be really, really great if we did a Q&A. Just if you go back and you watch, we've now done, what is this now,
Oh, great. I can bring it up,
seven,
Mark,
I
if you
think.
don't mind, while you're talking. Please
Yeah,
keep
I
talking. I'll
think
show
it's
people.
this. We're on like the seventh. So
Yeah,
anyone,
we've
if
done
you've
a
had a
lot.
question, and again, I understand, like I might be a little bit out of reach, but I'm still here. I'm still with Doug. We're still going to do anything. So if you want to do a Q&A, and it can be either about stuff that we've discussed in the past through any one of the previous videos, including this one, or if you just have any general questions at all that you think Doug and I can answer, having to do with Scientology, not having to do with Scientology, whatever you want to discuss. I mean, obviously, if it's too personal, we're not going to go through it, but obviously,
Oh,
it
we
got to
will.
be somewhat on topic. Well, that's true, Doug. Maybe,
I
and
mean,
maybe
look
I'll
at what
get,
we talked about today,
yeah.
Mark. That was pretty goddamn
Actually, that's
personal. I
true.
appreciate you
I'm
opening
thinking
up
of
about that.
other personal things that can't be said
Okay,
on YouTube.
fair enough.
However, I think it would be really cool. And again, please understand that if you're like, oh my gosh, I really wanted to say this, or I really wanted to ask Mark this question, go ahead. So we will have a Q&A, and then another video that we'd like to do. I would
That's
really
part
love it
3,
with
by the
Doug.
way. And then the next
Yes,
part is
part
what Mark's
two
going to describe part 2. This is going to be the badass
is
one.
yes. So part two, what we're going to do, and apologize for the out of order.
No worries.
We're going to
Let's go
discuss
to
the
exits.
sort of the philosophical um, origins of Scientology. And that includes, for example, getting into some of the concepts called Gnosticism, because that's a heavy
Right.
influence on Scientology,
Definitely.
something called esotericism. And then we're going to break down some of the New Age, the New Thought, and occultic practices that have all been blended into Scientology instead of focusing on just one of those issues, because how I look at it, and the things that I've studied again in college and so forth, you know, after being in Scientology, is that Gnosticism is probably, what is that? Well, it's a tradition that goes back a long time. We're going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be esoteric? That's a word that we hear colloquially a lot, but it's actually
Yep.
a philosophy that has influenced religions, both East and West. And again, New Age and New Thought we went over previously in videos, but I really want to be specific to Scientology. And then again, the occult stuff we're also going to talk about, hypnotism, black magic, and maybe some Crowley stuff. but we're going to try to do it, in one video, going through what these things are and what Hubbard specifically took to get into Scientology, and how he crafted Scientology by essentially taking things and little nuggets from all these different concepts. So again,
Exactly.
part two will be explaining the different philosophical inspirations, or let's say plagiarisms, that
Yes, plagiarisms is accurate.
Hubbard took. And then the next one is going to be a Q&A. So please, again, I know if you've tried to contact me on social media, please don't take it personally. It's just I've been online for a very long time. I have very few friends on social media. I just try to be personal, but there's always opportunities to ask me specific questions. So if you want to go back and listen to my videos, something comes to mind, write it down and I will answer, because I do love answering your questions. And even if the question challenges me, even if you completely disagree on something I might have said in a previous video, please bring that to it. Don't feel bad. And again, I just want to thank Doug again for being here and having the opportunity to come on his channel. It's really been an amazing experience for me, and I'm glad that you guys enjoy having me too. It's the feeling is mutual. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Mark, for coming on, man. And yeah, we're going to be deep diving. I've wanted to do this, and I can't think of who better to do it with than Mark, but we're going to show you possibly where the study tech comes from. And we're going to
Hmm.
show some slides on Gnosticism, and I'll cover the occult part and stuff. And Mark's like an expert on religions and the Gnosticism, and we're going to go
Hmm.
deep on that one. So that's going to be part two when
Yeah,
we have him back. We're
esotericism
going to,
too.
yeah, exactly. And on that, he's
Esotericism.
covered, these are some of the interviews that we've done. And, we've gone far beyond just Scientology, and Mark's a plethora of knowledge just to show you what he's asking for is that those who, and he's been a popular guest, like Mark, I told you, people have written emails and you've gotten a lot of positive response from the more esoteric videos that we've done.
Yeah.
If you guys
Hmm.
have a moment between now, if you haven't listened to him and you want to leave a comment in this video, for part 3, we're going to ask any questions that you have. And that's what he's kind of referring to. So the very
Yes.
first one we did was, if you want to see Mark's full story, how can intelligent people be ensnared by Scientology stupidity? And then we covered, this is a great video, Scientology's influence in Hollywood. We did Scientology, Teal Swan, massive cult leader, Christian Science and culture.
Hmm.
And then we did the New Thought and New Age movements. And that one involved, let me pull it up here, Ekankar, Agape Spiritual Center,
Yeah.
Hare Krishnas, and many more. That's like one of my favorites too, dude.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is on the homepage, guys. If you want to find it, you just scroll down. These are the various playlists, and you'll find it under SPTV Live. And we also did Exploring the Complicated World of Theological Stances and Exploring the Complicated World of non-theistic, let's see what this one is, non-theistic religions and philosophies, etc. So if you have any questions for Mark on any of those videos or today videos, please leave that. And then the real one is part 2, where we finally get to freaking deep dive on this thing, because I've been wanting
Yes.
to do that for some time. Let me just take up
Oh,
one more question.
esotericism is a great subject, but yeah, go
It
ahead.
is, and you're the
Yeah.
guy to do this with because of your freaking knowledge, man. That's going to be great to bounce back and forth with that. Aleister Crowley was a sex monster. Yeah, he's not a very good man at all. Let me pick up one more question, Mark, if you don't mind. Because yeah, I'm sorry, Dawn. Dawn, if your name is Dawn, why on earth do you have Uma Webb? It's confusing. Question: if you don't like the disability, why was I declared clear after I was hit by a car? I didn't know I was clear till I found my clear number
There we
online
go.
a couple months ago. Do you understand that?
I'm sorry, I just came back because I was there. So if they don't
Oh,
like
okay.
disability, why was I declared clear after I was hit by a car? I didn't know I was clear till I found my clear number online. I don't know.
I
I'm
have no
sorry. I'm
idea.
sorry. Apologize. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Not Uma, it's Dawn. She's gonna get on you if
Yeah.
you don't call her that.
I'm sorry,
Borrowed
Don. I
phone.
apologize.
Yeah, Dawn. I have no idea. If you're, that sounds crazy.
Yeah.
If you usually have to go through all sorts of stuff and to find yourself randomly being declared clear, are you sure about that? I don't.
Yeah.
Please, well, drop it in the comments,
Yeah.
Dawn, and we'll take
Yeah.
it up because I don't quite understand that
Absolutely.
question. Anyways, guys, thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And Mark, thanks again, brother, for coming on, man. I really
Of course.
appreciate it.
Thank
And
you,
we're going to
Doug.
leave you with the words of our psychotic founder, L. Ron Hubbard. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.
Now here is L. Ron Hubbard.
And you find in each and every case, you're finding the phenomenon of entities, communications, spaceships, other planets, locations, beingness in other states, and all of this, and you find this to be a consistent condition. You have fulfilled this definition of the mesh universe.